Chapter 988 Arrival of the Ninth King. Chapter 988 Arrival of the Ninth King. However, it didn't matter how freakish Ling Han was. After all, one's cultivation level limited how powerful they could become. Under Zhao Lun's powerful and relentless attacks, Ling Han could only be sent flying by slashes, palm strikes, and kicks. However, what made the spectators' heads go numb was the fact that Ling Han was still alive and kicking after taking all those strikes head-on. At most, he had only bled a little more than before. This caused Shuo Yuan to also itch with eagerness. If he could obtain such a formidable physique, would becoming invincible in his tier still be a mere dream? Would he still allow Zhao Lun to enjoy the title of number 1 prodigy by himself? He secretly decided that he would rush over no matter what if Zhao Lun managed to kill Ling Han. He would cut in before Zhao Lun, then pluck Ling Han's soul and obtain his incredible secret. Now, however, he would let Zhao Lun be that evil person who killed Ling Han. In some hidden area. Can we still not stop him? Zhong Deman asked in a panicked voice. His impression of Ling Han was fairly good. The head of institution said that we must give Great General Zhao some face, an elder said. So, we have to give Zhao Lun a limited amount of special treatment. Anyway, there's us here, so that brat definitely won't face any fatal danger. We can take advantage of this opportunity and suppress Zhao Lun's conceit and arrogance in a moment. That way, even Great General Zhao won't be able to say anything. Otherwise, even Head Fu won't be able to contain the rage of an elite at the heavenly body tier. However, that brat seems to be able to take quite the beating. What an absolute freak. Indeed, indeed. If I hadn't seen this with my own 2 eyes, I would have never believed that a cultivator who has just advanced to the medium extreme would be able to take so many strikes. By the looks of it, we can completely return home to take a nap, then come back over to check on the situation. There was a total of 7 elders whispering to each other, and they were all astonished by the strength that Ling Han had displayed. Zhao Lun's expression became increasingly cold. Although Ling Han was continuously being wounded, he just wouldn't die no matter what. The longer this lasted, the more face he would lose. Even ordinary cultivators at the consummate level wouldn't need so long to dispose of a cultivator at the medium extreme, not to mention that he was a 4-star genius. Zhao Lun, are you done yet? An aloof yet charming voice traveled over as Xue Yenyu walked over from the distance. Her beautiful face was full of anger. An excited expression instantly spread across Zhao Lun's face, and there was a hint of lust in his eyes. Among some circles in the imperial capital, Xue Yenyu had the nickname Little Empress. This wasn't because she was very strong, very talented, or had a very powerful background, but instead because of the hint of seductiveness in her aloof nature that was a little like that of the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire. The Empress was out of everyone's league, but if they could capture Xue Yenyu's heart, she would still act as a good replacement. Thus, the number of people pursuing Xue Yenyu also far exceeded the number of people pursuing Zhu Menghuai, who was one of the twin pearls of the empire. It was only because Zhao Lun, only child of Great General Zhao, had acted earliest and announced his ownership of Xue Yenyu that no one dared to openly covet her. She was a seductive beauty who could hook one's soul, and, worried that his son would drown in a sea of lust, Great General Zhao forbade Zhao Lun from marrying before he reached the Sun-Moon tier. It was because of this that Xue Yenyu was able to maintain her freedom until now. Otherwise, she would have already been sold by her clan. Thus, Zhao Lun would feel a burning desire and lust every time he saw Xue Yenyu, and he could barely contain himself from immediately pushing this captivating and seductive beauty down. "He, I'm merely killing a person," Zhao Lun said indifferently. "Why such an overreaction, Yenyu?" Ever since Xue Yenyu had publicly said that she had made a private pledge of marriage with Ling Han, Zhao Lun had already sentenced Ling Han to death in his mind. He had simply been lacking an excuse to kill him. "Don't drag other unrelated people into the matter between you and me," Xue Yenyu scolded loudly. Zhao Lun sneered, and said, "This brat isn't an unrelated person. Zhao Lun, what do you want?" Xue Yenyu shouted as she bit her ruby lip. Originally, she had indeed only planned on using Ling Han to escape Zhao Lun's clutches. After their trip to the Heavenly Sea Mystery Realm, however, her mindset underwent a gradual change. Now, She definitely didn't want to see Ling Han die. Zhao Lun involuntarily squinted his eyes in anger. He had always held Shui Yenyu in high regard, but had Shui Yenyu ever cared for him even a little? And now, Shui Yenyu actually looked like she was willing to sacrifice everything for a lowly ant from a small world. His eyes turned red from extreme jealousy. No, Ling Han must die. Zhao Lun humphed in fury and pointed a finger at Shui Yenyu, rendering her immobile. Then, he charged toward Ling Han. Die, die, die. There's no way that I can't even kill a measly ant of the medium extreme. Zhao Lun chuckled coldly as frightening divine patterns flashed across his hands like undulating water. Pa! Zhao Lun's palm struck over, and a gaping wound instantly appeared in Ling Han's chest. His blood and flesh instantly disappeared, revealing his white bones. What was harrowing was that Ling Han was already channeling his indestructible heaven scroll, yet the rate at which his wound healed was unbelievably slow. Ha 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 ha. Seeing that his strike had wounded Ling Han, Zhao Lun instantly started to laugh loudly. He would corrode all of Ling Han's flesh, then slowly disintegrate his divine sense. He would wipe his love rival off the face of this world. The medium extreme is only the medium extreme, after all, he said in disdain. Ling Han wasn't flustered, and as he continued to defend against Zhao Lun's strikes, he coldly responded, "You're merely relying on the fact that you're 2 minor levels above me. If we were on the same cultivation level, I could slay you as easily as I slay chickens. It's a shame that you'll never get such a chance," Zhao Lun said in a sinister voice. "You're destined to die here today." His attacks became even more frantic as he spoke. "Who said he won't?" A furious voice sounded in the distance. "Greetings, Ninth King." Everyone in the surroundings instantly kneeled down to pay their respects. No one here was exempt from this. The left and right ministers and the 7 generals were elites at the heavenly body tier, so they didn't need to kneel when seeing the Empress. However, they still had to cup their fists to express their absolute respect. Seeing the 9 kings was equivalent to seeing the Empress. This was the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire's holy decree. Zhao Lun wasn't Great General Zhao, so he instantly stopped his attacks and half-kneeled on the ground. Hu Feiyun walked out from the crowd of spectators and instantly yelped in surprise upon seeing the gaping wound on the left of Ling Han's ribcage. "Ling Han, you're wounded." The spectators were almost frightened to death when they heard her. The 9th King's relationship with Ling Han is this good. She was the 9th King. What kind of status was this? Even the left and right ministers and the 7 generals had to respectfully obey her commands. She was one of the 9 people the Empress was most fond of. Yet, Ling Han had actually become acquainted with her. Jealousy instantly appeared on everyone's faces. If Ling Han was genuinely able to marry the 9th King, his status would instantly soar from that of a lowly ant to an unimaginable height. Even powerful figures such as the left and right minister wouldn't be able to match his status. Ling Han nodded and said, "I'm fine." Zhao Lun's body was trembling slightly. How could he imagine that Ling Han would somehow become acquainted with the 9th King while having a dubious relationship with Shui Yenyu? Where was justice? Hu Feiyun's expression relaxed slightly when she heard Ling Han's reply. "Zhao Lun, what's so impressive about bullying someone weaker than you? Everyone says that you're the #1 prodigy in the imperial capital. So, why don't you show me your abilities today? Yi Mu, seal his cultivation level and make him fight with Ling Han on equal footing." She turned around and issued an order to a female guard. "As you command." The female guard showed no hesitation as she pressed her palm toward Zhao Lun. Chapter 989, Residual Gold War Buddha Fist. Chapter 989, Residual Gold War Buddha Fist. Although Zhao Lun was surprised and angry, he didn't dare go against the 9th King's will. Moreover, the female guard was an elite at the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, and her strength was several tens of thousands of times stronger than his. Thus, it came as no surprise that his cultivation level was instantly sealed. Black divine chains appeared on 2 of his mountain rivers, forcefully locking them down. His cultivation level immediately fell to the medium extreme, which was the same as Ling Han's. Although there were many powerful elders in the academy, none of them came out to help Ling Han just then, as they were all wary of Great General Zhao. Now that the Ninth King had personally issued a command, who still dared to stick their nose in this matter? Out of Great General Zhao and the Ninth King, who was more influential? If Great General Zhao dared to provoke the Ninth King, the 7 generals would quickly become the 6 generals. There was no doubt about this. Now, you two can battle again. Hu Feiyun's voice was cold, as if she wasn't biased toward any one of them. Zhao Lun was naturally seething with anger. What kind of demonic power did this lowly being from the small world possess? It had only been half a year, yet the left minister's daughter and the Ninth King were all standing up for him now. Meanwhile, although Shui Yenyu and Jiyu Lingyu's statuses were much lower, they were still renowned beauties from well-off families. He laughed with confidence as he spoke. So what if we battle with the same cultivation level? I, Zhao Lun, am the #1 prodigy of these past 1,000 years. Who can challenge my might? However, he genuinely didn't dare to take his opponent lightly this time around. He balled his hands into fists. Wang. Golden light instantly radiated from his fists. Pu, pu, pu. His sleeves bulged up as if his muscles were suddenly exploding in size at this moment. Is this Great General Zhao's ultimate technique, the residual Gold War Buddha fist? Someone yelped in surprise. That's right, this is one of Great General Zhao's ultimate techniques. It's rumored that when Great General Zhao was at the Sun Moon tier, he once used 3 moves from this technique to smash a powerful enemy at the consummate level of the Sun Moon tier to pulp. That was the battle which earned him the status of a great elite. After so many years, Great General Zhao has definitely raised the might of the residual Gold War Buddha fist by a few notches. Zhao Lun is getting serious this time. Of course he is. They're both at the same cultivation level right now, and Ling Han is also a 4-star genius. If he doesn't take it seriously, won't he simply be seeking death? I seem to have heard that Ling Han reached the Crimson Lake Island 3 times. So, is it possible that he's reached the level of 5-star genius? Hehe, 5-star geniuses only exist in legends. How can it be so easy to reach it? Him reaching the island 3 times is indeed more impressive than Zhao Lun. However, he can at most only surpass 4.5 stars. He definitely can't surpass 5 stars. Zhao Lun strode toward Ling Han as the spectators quietly chatted among themselves. Ling Han clasped the wound on his left side with one of his hands. There was a strong corrosive ability that could melt metal and disintegrate bones contained within Zhao Lun's palm strike. Moreover, it even formed divine patterns in his wound, and these divine patterns continued to circulate and prevent his wound from healing. Ling Han had to destroy these divine patterns before he could heal his wound. However, these divine patterns were abnormally sturdy, and even his origin power couldn't wash them away. Moreover, he couldn't enter the Black Tower right now, which meant he couldn't use the Black Tower's abilities to get rid of these divine patterns, either. He could only rack his brain for other ideas. A thought flashed through Ling Han's mind, and he instantly activated his divine patterns of flame. Hiss! The divine patterns clashed, and the foreign divine patterns were quickly burned into ashes. As expected, when Zhao Lun had attacked him just then, he had seen a layer of water-like divine light. That was most likely a water element cultivation technique. It was in conflict with the fire element, and using one against the other was the best way to deal with techniques of these elements. Even at the same cultivation level, I can still crush you with ease. Zhao Lun swung his fists as he charged over. First strike of the residual Gold War Buddha fist, rising wave stirs winds and cloud. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, I've never come across an opponent who's stronger than me at the same cultivation level. You're no different. He unleashed his earth-overturning seal in reply to Zhao Lun's strike. Peng! Ling Han stood proud and unmoving during this exchange. Meanwhile, Zhao Lun heavily stumbled back a dozen or so steps. The blood in his body churned, and his face also shifted between white and red. Gasp! When battling in the same cultivation level, Zhao Lun is truly no match for Ling Han. Excitement and disbelief swept through the crowd. Putting aside Zhao Lun's personality, the level of his natural talent was indeed worthy of being #1 in the Chaotic Star's majestic empire. In fact, he had displayed an even stronger potential, and there was a chance that he could become an elite of the heavenly body tier in the future. Yet, a freakish talent such as him was actually at a disadvantage while battling against someone at the same cultivation level. This Ling Han. His power is definitely not limited to the early stage of the medium extreme. It's probably close to the peak stage already. I agree. His palm techniques seem very ordinary, yet he's still able to wield such terrifying battle prowess. This is almost certainly because his power far exceeds his cultivation level, therefore raising the level of his battle prowess. Gasp. Does this mean his battle prowess will become even stronger if he cultivates a higher level secret technique? He can become a 5-star genius. Everyone exclaimed in surprise. Were they truly going to witness the rise of a 5-star genius? Damn it, damn it. Zhao Lun roared in fury as he launched another attack. Second strike of the residual Gold War Buddha fist 3 waves conquer the world. Boom. The might of his fist instantly soared threefold. As before, Ling Han responded with his earth overturning seal. Both he and Zhao Lun were using metal element cultivation techniques, and as metallic sheen collided and intertwined, it was as if both of them had become metallic gods of war. As their attacks collided, both of them leaped backward. They were evenly matched in this exchange. Ha 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 ha. Zhao Lun roared with laughter, and said, "Your strength is only SOSO. I still haven't unleashed my most powerful third strike." Ling Han smiled calmly, and said, "You're feeling too good about yourself, and you're also too good at deceiving yourself. Who said that this is the full extent of my strength? Is that so?" Zhao Lun charged over again, once more unleashing the second strike of the residual Gold War Buddha fist. Terrifying rays of metallic light intertwined as their attacks collided. Very few people noticed that Zhao Lun's eyes would become slightly more golden every time he launched an attack. After 10 or so strikes, his eyes had already become completely gold. Third strike of the residual Gold War Buddha fist 9 waves pierced the sun and moon. His body grew rapidly as he roared, and he transformed into a golden giant that measured a full 9 meters in height. He had finally unleashed his most powerful strike, one that raised his battle prowess by a whopping 9-fold. It wasn't that he was going easy on Ling Han just then. Rather, he needed to strengthen his physique before he could unleash the third strike. Thus, he needed to enter the state of the 9-meter golden body first, something that required considerable time. Once this transformation was complete, however, he was able to launch an earth-shattering strike. Boom! A gigantic golden fist smashed down from the sky. There was nothing fancy about it, and it was all brute explosive power. Ling Han struck out with his palm again, merely unleashing the earth-overturning seal. Peng! Fist and palm met, and the discrepancy in their size was jarringly obvious. The golden fist crushed down and relentlessly pushed Ling Han backward. If it hadn't been for the stones in this arena being strong enough, 2 streaks of footprints would have already been dug into the ground. Ha 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 ha. Zhao Lun roared with laughter as he furiously smashed his 2 gigantic fists toward Ling Han. The residual Gold War Buddha fist had 3 moves, yet these weren't different in terms of technique. Rather, they were different in terms of how much power was channeled. The energy expenditure of the third strike was huge, and it also came with some side effects. After all, it was a strike that could raise one's battle prowess 9-fold. During this time, the wielder of this technique was almost invincible. Who in the same cultivation level could challenge him? Chapter 990, Battle for the Title of Number 1 Prodigy. Chapter 990, Battle for the Title of Number 1 Prodigy. Zhao Lun laughed loudly, and said, "You're still too weak to challenge me for the title of Number 1 Prodigy." As he spoke, a deafening sound echoed from his 9-meter-tall golden body. Like arrows being fired one after another, his fists relentlessly beat down on Ling Han. It was as if his attacks would never stop. Everyone was stunned by Zhao Lun's overwhelming might. As expected of the Number 1 prodigy of the past 1,000 years. His might is truly formidable, and even if he battles someone at the same cultivation level of the peak stage of the medium extreme, how many can stand firm under such a vicious barrage of attacks? Ling Han humphed, and activated his divine patterns of gravity. Zhao Lun instantly felt as if he were bogged down in mud. He stepped forward with a foot, Yet his other foot was surprisingly impossible to lift off the ground. He couldn't help but stagger. Divine patterns of gravity. Zhao Lun humphed. He had also obtained gravity element mountain river stones before, so he naturally knew what Ling Han was doing right now. He also activated his divine patterns of gravity to cancel out the effects of Ling Han's. Then, he raised his gigantic golden fist and smashed them toward Ling Han again. Boom! This strike was terrifying, and its pressure caused even the surrounding space to fluctuate. Ling Han was fearless, and he immediately activated his 7-kill subduing soul technique. Zhao Lun instantly felt as if there were needles jabbing at his mind. He could barely stop himself from groaning in pain. However, he was extremely experienced, and immediately deduced that Ling Han had used a spiritual attack on him, so he hurriedly stabilized his divine sense. However, this momentary pause instantly caused Zhao Lun's fist to lose its target. Ling Han took advantage of this opportunity to grab his wrist, after which he viciously threw him outward. Peng! Zhao Lun's body was gigantic right now, so his fall was also extremely heavy. A dark expression spread across his face as he crashed into the ground, and a mouthful of blood instantly shot out from his mouth. Zhao Lun was wounded. Someone was actually able to wound Zhao Lun when battling at the same cultivation level. This was definitely a mightily stunning piece of news. Zhao Lun's name had always been synonymous with the term invincible in the same cultivation level. Now, however, he had been beaten to the point of vomiting blood. Who would believe this if they didn't see it with their own 2 eyes? Ah! Zhao Lun howled in fury as countless veins bulged from his gigantic golden body. They were like several hundred golden snakes, each of which radiated with a sinister aura. He slapped his hands against the ground, and his body instantly shot back to an upright position. Then, he charged toward Ling Han again. Boom! His fist crashed over like an overwhelming divine mountain. I said that if we were at the same cultivation level, I could suppress you with a single hand. Ling Han placed his left hand behind his back as he struck his right palm toward Zhao Lun. However, this wasn't his main attack, and he unleashed his 7-kill subduing soul technique at Zhao Lun again. Immortals also cultivated their spirit. Although Ling Han could use mountain river stones to raise his strength to the immortal level before, his lack of corresponding comprehension meant that his divine sense didn't experience any growth. It was only because he had taken a sip of the reincarnation tea that his divine sense was far more powerful than ordinary cultivators at the shattering void tier. Combined with the tempering from the second layer of his indestructible heaven scroll, his divine sense was not only powerful, but also incredibly stable. His divine sense wasn't any bit weaker than an ordinary cultivator's at the mountain river tier. After he advanced into the mountain river tier, the strength of his divine sense naturally underwent a qualitative change, far exceeding the level achieved by ordinary cultivators at the medium extreme. It was definitely on par with cultivators at the high extreme, perhaps even the consummate level. Thus, Zhao Lun couldn't block Ling Han's spiritual attack even though his divine sense was already at the consummate level. Although each spiritual attack could only affect him a tiny bit, this was a battle between elites, so each tiny bit was enough to influence the outcome of the battle. Peng! 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 Zhao Lun's strikes were powerful, yet none of them was able to hit their target. So, what did it matter if they were powerful? Zhao Lun was either slammed into the ground by Ling Han or relentlessly struck by his palms. Quong, quong, quong. As if it had become metallic, his golden body continued to ring with crisp clanging sounds. Who would have thought that apart from a short while in the beginning, Zhao Lun's #1 prodigy would end up being beaten one-sidedly? Zhao Lun was simmering with rage. He was being beaten in front of so many people. How utterly humiliating. His expression became frosty as a powerful aura instantly emanated from his body. This was an extremely ancient aura that was also brimming with a formidable might. Power of the nation, many people exclaimed. Not long ago, Zhao Lun had been appointed as a 7th-rank military officer by the Empress, meaning he was able to use the power of the nation. Although he wasn't allowed to draw on as much power as the left and right ministers and the 7 generals could, his low cultivation level meant that he wouldn't be able to draw on much even if there was no restriction. Zhao Lun's disadvantage instantly disappeared under the support of the power of the nation. His golden body became dazzling again. In fact, it was even more dazzling than before. Peng, 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 peng. He grabbed this opportunity to counterattack, instantly forcing Ling Han to continuously retreat. Ling Han was slightly astonished. With the support of the power of the nation, even Zhao Lun's divine sense seemed to gain an extra layer of protection. When he unleashed his 7-kill subduing soul technique, it was actually rebounded back, completely unable to harm Zhao Lun. Die. Zhao Lun's eyes were red with rage as his gigantic body cast a huge shadow on the ground. Ling Han smiled calmly, and said, "You've merely raised your battle prowess by 1 star and used the power of the nation to protect your divine sense. It's not like you have an indestructible body. What are you so smug about?" Ling Han increased the distance between him and Zhao Lun before immediately releasing an arrow, using his body like a bow and his origin power as an arrow. Zhao Lun was deeply astonished. This was the technique that had killed Bai Yuanxi not long ago. Although the might of this arrow paled in comparison, a large portion of his strength had also been sealed at this moment. He couldn't take this arrow lightly. He raised his hand with much difficulty. Pu. The arrow pierced through his arm, with even his golden body unable to block its might. Then, the arrow transformed into specks of origin power that eventually vanished into thin air. Zhao Lun's face was ashen as blood flowed from his arm. After drawing on the power of the nation, he had initially thought that victory was within his grasp. Much to his disbelief, however, Ling Han immediately gave him a slap across the cheek. This wasn't the ultimate arrow, so Ling Han wasn't drained of all his strength after firing this shot. He immediately drew his bow and fired another shot. Twang, twang. Zhao Lun retreated a step with each arrow that Ling Han fired. His body was riddled with holes. Even his golden body was unable to resist the power of the annihilating dragon star arrow. Ah! Zhao Lun let loose a furious cry as the golden light on his body disappeared. Meanwhile, he also shrunk from 9 meters back down to his original size. Although the 9-meter-tall golden body could increase his battle prowess 9-fold, it also turned him into a huge target that was much more susceptible to Ling Han's attacks. Could it be that Zhao Lun is going to surrender? "I'll let you see my true strength," Zhao Lun said in a sinister voice. He extended his right hand, and it surprisingly became water-like and inky black. Ling Han's heart jolted. This was the aura that Zhao Lun's strike from before had contained. This was the aura that had even torn apart his physique and corroded all the way to his godly bones. Is this the ancient technique that Zhao Lun's been practicing all this time? Numerous thoughts flashed through his mind, yet his hands didn't slow down a single bit, instantly releasing another arrow. Zhao Lun didn't dodge, and instead furiously charged toward Ling Han. Pu. The origin power arrow collided with Zhao Lun's body. However, Zhao Lun's body uncannily transformed into a liquid-like state that was malleable and like cotton. The arrow instantly tore through his body. Then, like ripples of water, his torn body started to heal itself. Regardless of how strong a god tool was, could it permanently sever running water? Chapter 991, Corrosive Water 3000. Chapter 991, Corrosive Water 3000. Xiao, Zhao Lun had already reached Ling Han, his fist crashing down on him. Ling Han stretched out his arms to parry, but he immediately discovered that, to his shock, Zhao Lun's arms had actually become akin to flowing water, bursting through his defenses and striking towards his chest. Peng, he was immediately sent flying, and only landed after turning 3 somersaults midair. He looked down, and his chest had actually been corroded, and bones could be seen. Indeed, it was this kind of attack. Ha ha ha. Seeing that his blow had taken effect, Zhao Lun burst into sudden loud laughter, and once more brandished his fists in a series of attacks. This was the ancient technique that he had cultivated, called Corrosive Water 3000. Previously, he had stayed underneath a waterfall to observe the rhythm of flowing water so that he could master this ancient technique. And now that he was using it, the might of this move was indeed incredible. In that moment, Ling Han did not have any good way to respond to this move, and could only retreat continuously. Zhao Lun had definitely not done something as simple as turning into liquid. Otherwise, with the power behind the attack of a mountain river tier cultivator, even a huge river could be beaten into billions of water droplets, so Zhao Lun would be turned to a torn body and crushed bones. In the present case, Zhao Lun was showing the full flexibility attribute of water, and no force could be exerted on him at all. No matter how sky-high your strength is, can you still hurt even the tiniest bit of me? Ha 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 ha, this is what true power is. Zhao Lun laughed madly, delivering punches in quick succession. With the boost from Power of the Nation, he was now superior to Ling Han by a sub-minor level. Furthermore, Power of the Nation still had the effect of protecting his divine sense, and now, his corrosive water 3000 had become a threat to Ling Han's physique. No matter from which angle he looked at it, his victory was assured. In a battle of equal levels, I am the true invincible one. Hearing Zhao Lun's boasts, Shuo Yuan revealed an expression of defiance. However, he had no choice but to admit that in a battle at equal level, he was indeed not a match for Zhao Luanhe could not defeat him in the past, and even more so could not beat him now. This move of transforming himself into flowing water, an ancient technique that was filled with a corrosive ability, was really too terrifying. Just become a pool of corroded liquid. Zhao Lun laughed loudly, his eyes exuding a cold, manic light. The fact that he had been pressured by Ling Han to the extent that he had to reveal this ancient technique ahead of time made him extremely displeased. It should have been one of his biggest trump cards, used to suppress powerful foes, yet now he had revealed it ahead of time. He would definitely be targeted by others, and they would definitely try to find a way to counter it. Thoughts streaked through Ling Han's mind like lightning. Previously, he had used the divine patterns of flame to erase the poison of the corrosive waters, so could he use them to restrain the other, then? He was a believer in getting things done. As he coagulated an arrow, he had already circulated the divine patterns of flame. Xiao, the arrow of origin power shot out, and light red appeared on the original white of the arrow. Zhao Lun was unafraid, not even bothering to block. He wanted to use the same trick again, and allow the arrow to pass through his body. The arrow reached its target, and shot into his left shoulder without erring, but unlike he had expected, the arrow did not shoot right out without dealing any kind of damage to him. Instead, his expression changed drastically into one of astonishment as a hint of pain appeared on his face. Black smoke was actually streaming out of his shoulder, and there was a faint smell of burnt meat. Zhao Lun stumbled back, an expression of absolute disbelief and shock appearing on his face. Ling Han actually broke through his corrosive water 3000. How is this possible? Don't think that fire would be able to overcome water. If the corrosive water 3000 could be easily overcome by flames, then what need was there for him to spend such a long time to cultivate this technique? The corrosive water was extremely poisonous, and was unafraid of flames. At least, as far as he knew, if one wanted to overcome his corrosive water, it was only possible if that person's power dominated over him completely. One attack, and his body would be completely shattered as he would collapse, heavily wounded. That was the only way the corrosive water 3000 would stop functioning. Ling Han's power was definitely not as strong as his. Then there was only one reason. His flames were of terrifyingly high quality, and might even be not the least bit inferior to his corrosive water. That was the only way his flames could overcome his water. Incredibly jealous, he could not help but ask, what technique is this? It should be known that he had spent a few decades just to successfully cultivate this technique. Meanwhile, the other party had broken through to the mountain river tier not even a full year ago, yet had already cultivated a secret technique that could match his ancient technique. How could he accept this? This was a blow heavy enough to practically twist all his views on life. Ling Han gave an "oh," and then said, "It's not any technique. I just obtained flame mountain river stones from the flame cave, and after refining them, I obtained divine patterns of flame, but I didn't imagine that they just so happened to be able to restrain your power." Zhao Lun was gaping in shock. It was actually so simply he did not even cultivate any kind of secret technique, and merely refined a few mountain river stones. He was really about to cry. However, he immediately recalled the effects of the gravity mountain river stone. They were extremely amazing. The mountain river stone that Ling Han obtained definitely had to be of a special attribute, gifting him divine patterns of flame. Damn! 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 He cursed repeatedly in his heart. Were the divine patterns of flame really so powerful? It should be known that he, too, had obtained a flame mountain river stone, though he had not done so personally. Instead, it had come into his hands by paying a copious amount at an auction. However, the divine patterns of flame were definitely no match for corrosive water 3000. Wait! Zhao Lun suddenly exclaimed, how many flame mountain river stones have you gotten exactly? Not too bad, just 7. As Ling Han spoke, he continued to rush towards Zhao Lun. Now that he knew how to oppose the corrosive water 3000, what further threat did Zhao Lun pose to him? Peng, peng, peng. He wrapped divine patterns of flame around his fists. This was much simpler than adding them onto the arrow of origin power. 7 divine patterns glowed at the same time, and his fists were burning with flames. One punch, and Zhao Lun was spitting up blood repeatedly. 7. Zhao Lun's eyes were practically about to pop out of their sockets. How precious were mountain river stones with special attributes. Even a genius like him could only manage to land on the Crimson Lakes Island twice, and obtain just 2 gravity mountain river stones. And Ling Han actually got 7, he was practically a monster. This became the straw that broke the camel's back, shattering his fighting spirit. Furthermore, he had endured so many arrows just now, so how could it have had no effect at all? He did not have as tough a physique as Ling Han, and was merely using his origin power to forcefully suppress his wounds. But he had to stretch out his 9-meter golden body, and also had to suppress his wounds. How much pressure did he have to endure? Now that his fighting spirit had collapsed, he instantly could not hold on anymore. Peng! He was thrashed by Ling Han, and this time, he was really like a beaten army in total collapse. It was no longer possible to turn the tides. Let's see you be arrogant. Let's see you be domineering. Ling Han was treating Zhao Lun like a punching bag, striking continuously. Didn't you want to kill me? Come on, then. You just bully others because of your higher cultivation level and your better background. What difference is there between you and those profligate spoilt young masters? What number 1 genius? Absolute crap. The more Ling Han spoke, the more furious he became. He transformed his anger into force behind his punches, and endlessly pummeled his fists onto Zhao Lun's body. Have you had enough? Zhao Lun shouted. He was the only son of the great General Zhao. When had he endured such humiliation before? You can't take it already? Ling Han raised his foot, just about to step down on Zhao Lun's face. Everyone had almost stopped breathing from the shock. If this foot landed, then a huge enmity that would not end until one was dead would really form between both parties. But upon further contemplation, it was apparent that Zhao Lun wanted to kill Ling Han, so there did not seem to be anything else left to fear. You dare. Zhao Lun meanwhile was so terrified his face had turned completely pale. If his face was really stepped on in front of so many people, what pride would he have left to face others? Chapter 992, Can't Stand Out Too Much. Chapter 992, Can't Stand Out Too Much. Ling Han's foot paused, and then stopped. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. If this foot really landed, who knew what kind of madness Zhao Lun would sink into? In his rage, he might even kill them all to stop them from leaking the truth. Zhao Lun seemed like he had completely spread out. This defeat was enough of a humiliation. If his face was really stepped on, how would he be able to face others in future? If I step on others, I'll stand out too much, which doesn't match my modest image, Ling Han mumbled to himself. Zhao Lun almost exploded in fury. You actually think you're humble? You've hooked up with the daughter of the left minister, and there was also the 9th king, and you had even snatched my woman. You are already standing out so much, so how else do you want to display how modest you are? However, now that Ling Han did not step on his face, he did not dare take the initiative to incite him. Otherwise, it would really be too late for him to regret. Ling Han broke out into a grin, removed his shoe, and said, If I use this to smack you, it would not stand out too much, I guess. Zhao Lun's whole body erupted in goosebumps, and he broke out in a cold sweat due to his terror. He exclaimed, Don't you take things too far. I am Zhao Lun. Zhao Lun. Lun your sister. Pa. Ling Han simply smacked his shoe right over, landing a solid hit, immediately leaving behind a distinct shoe print on Zhao Lun's face. Weren't you so very arrogant? Didn't you want to make other people into your dogs? Today, I will teach you how to behave. Who do you think you are? Just because you have a little authority, a little status, and some abilities, you can act so arrogant, and fancy that you are the son of a great general? If you actually became an emperor one day, wouldn't you float straight up into the sky? Ling Han accompanied each word with a slap, and very soon, Zhao Lun's face was covered with shoe prints, completely concealing his handsome face. Those in the surroundings all inhaled sharply. Their mouths were gaping wide as they watched dumbstruck. The one and only son of the great General Zhao was actually slapped with a shoe in public. What kind of great humiliation was this? What if the great General Zhao flew into rage? If he really wanted to kill Ling Han, how could it be that the Empress would behead the great General Zhao to be buried next to him? Ling Han was only Ling Han, a native from a small world, so how could he be compared with the great General Zhao? Pa, 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 pa. The sound of slapping rang out endlessly, but after only about 20-odd slaps, with a pa, the shoe in Ling Han's hand broke in half. Yi, your skin is really quite thick and old, no wonder you dare to act so arrogant and tyrannical. Ling Han casually tossed down the broken shoe, and removed the other side as well. Then, he drew out a new pair of shoes which he slipped on. Lun your sister, you broke one of my shoes, so how are you going to compensate me for it? Ling Han lifted the other shoe, looking like he was about to start smacking him again. Everyone was stunned. You were obviously the one who had smacked him with the shoe so hard that it broke in half. At this moment, 10,000 curse words had to be streaming through Zhao Lun's head. You actually make a false countercharge? I've never seen someone as tyrannical as you. But upon further thought, Zhao Lun had been so arrogant previously. It had obviously been a mortal duel between Ling Han and Bai Yuanxi, and he actually ignored the academy regulations, and planned to interfere and cause injury. If it were not for the fact that Ling Han's physique was tough enough, he would have long since been killed 800 times, and if it were not for the fact that the Ninth King had rushed here just in time, what chance would Ling Han have had in turning the tides? Even the mildest person would have a temper. Ling Han, you've gone too far. Zhao Lun exclaimed, his brow twisted and eyes slanted. Though Ling Han's shoe had indeed broken from the force, his face was not all that better, either. Is it too far? Pa. Ling Han once again delivered a smack with his shoe with a grin, and countered, at which part have I gone too far? Have I gone as far as you? You just wait, I will definitely tear you into pieces, Zhao Lun said through gritted teeth. His true abilities could let him suppress Ling Han, who knew how many times. Unfortunately, the latter had gotten the backing of the Ninth King, and now in a battle at equal level, he was actually being suppressed completely. Silly bird, looks like you still haven't learnt your lesson. Ling Han once again began a series of slaps, beating Zhao Lun into submission. Should we step out to stop them? The several elders of the academy were again whispering amongst themselves. But the Ninth King hasn't spoken yet, so how can we speak up first? Millimeter. With Zhao Lun suffering such a massive humiliation in the academy, Great General Zhao would definitely take them to task, but the problem here was that the Ninth King was even higher up in hierarchy, and even she had not spoken yet, so who would be able to stop them? To put it bluntly, even if Great General Zhao stepped out and personally made a bid for mercy, whether the Ninth King agreed or not depended completely on her mood. These elders all looked at each other, and only felt that they were trapped between a rock and a hard place. If they had known that it would have turned out like this, they should have stepped out at the first opportunity to call a halt. But, who asked them to want to make both Ling Han and Zhao Lun suffer a little, and give them a little lesson, hence allowing things to develop to this stage? And the result? Things had progressed to a point that it had completely exceeded their sphere of control. Zhao Lun knew that it was useless to beg for mercy, and only glared at Ling Han ferociously. As long as he got free. He just had to get free. Ling Han saw this, and asked smilingly, "Are you thinking that the moment you get free, you will spare no expense to kill me?" Without waiting for Zhao Lun's response, he had already delivered another smack with his shoe. Lun your sister, dream on. Ling Han, don't lower yourself to his level. Come with me to see Big Sister No, Her Imperial Majesty. Hu Feiyun finally spoke. Great, Zhao Lun had been heavily thrashed, and was actually spoken of as such. He was probably going to throw up blood in his fury. Her Imperial Majesty wants to see me. Ling Han was stunned for a moment. The Empress was so busy, so how would she have the leisure to summon him? If he counted that time when he took part in the competition between the three empires, this was the second time. In short half a year's time, he was summoned by the Empress again. How heavily did the Empress favor him? Everyone was wiping off cold sweat, thinking that the ninth king had obviously come with the duty of announcing an imperial decree, yet actually dragged things out so long before finally speaking of it. If this had been any other person, he would have already been executed 10,000 times. But if it was the ninth king, no one would dare tattle on her. What a joke, she and the Empress actually addressed each other as sisters, so who would dare try sow dissension between them? Fine then, let's go. Ling Han casually threw the shoe away, turned, and smiled at Zhao Lun. Lun your sister, I'll thrash you again next time. In front of everyone's eyes, he and the ninth king walked off without a second thought. Ah! Zhao Lun released a roar of fury. In this battle, his great reputation had really been completely torn to pieces, and he was too humiliated to face others. He leaped up, and Xiao disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Everyone exchanged looks, both excited and curious. This Zhao Lun would definitely not let things go like this, but Ling Han had the ninth king's support, and even Zhao Lun would not dare to use the authority of the general's residence to harm him. How would things develop? Yet Ling Han did not take too much notice of this. He followed the ninth king all the way to the doors of the imperial palace, but the ninth king tugged on him and took a turning. They passed the doors without entering, and directly returned where they came. Yi, wasn't I summoned by Her Imperial Majesty? Ling Han asked curiously. Hey, that was just something I blabbed out. I purposely wanted others to know that you are now someone who has the attention of Her Imperial Majesty so others would not dare to harm you. This was the answer the ninth king gave to him. Ling Han was both touched and amused. The ninth king actually dared to announce a false imperial decree just to give him a protective talisman. She was probably the only one who would dare do such a thing. However, this girl was a little silly. She herself was actually enough to restrain those minor characters. There was absolutely no need to borrow the great tiger skin of the Empress. Chapter 993 Receiving the Gambling Stakes. Chapter 993 Receiving the Gambling Stakes. One could say that the ninth king was courageous, yet she would shriek in fear at the sight of a rat. On the other hand, one could say that the ninth king was cowardly, yet she even dared to fake an imperial decree. In Ling Han's eyes, however, she was merely a lonely young girl. That was right, she was just lonely. Although she was the ninth king, in possession of great power and protected by the Empress like a reverse scale, she was in fact very lonely. She didn't have any companions of the same age, and the other 8 kings, as well as the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire, were all too busy with cultivation to accompany her. Moreover, the guards by her side were all extremely respectful and obedient, and there was no way that they could become her friends. This was also why she had unexpectedly praised Ling Han as a strong character when he didn't kneel upon seeing her. She had seen far too many people kneel before her. In fact, she desperately craved a friend of the same age, and this was also why Shui Yenyu had become friends with her so quickly. With the ninth king accompanying him, Ling Han was able to tour the entire imperial capital. Only when the sun started to set did the ninth king reluctantly let him leave. Ling Han returned to the academy, only to find that Li Weiwei and Ji Yuna had already come. Both of them could barely contain their excitement. Ling Han smiled, and said, "Judging by your huge grins, it looks like you've already collected the winnings." Hee, I went to collect our winnings straight away, so how would they dare to cheat me? Li Weiwei smugly retrieved a black card and tossed it toward Ling Han. This is a true origin stone card issued by the Majestic Empire, and you can use it to exchange true origin stones from the Majestic Empire's private banks at any time. It's extremely easy, and you can exchange as much as you want. Ling Han nodded in understanding. 4 million true origin stones was no small sum, and perhaps even the majestic empire's private banks didn't store such a great amount of wealth. However, he was an emperor himself, so he knew that the existence of such virtual currency would allow the number of liquid assets in circulation to grow manifold, thereby promoting the development of businesses. Anyhow, in terms of cultivation alone, how many true origin stones could one spend in a day? Most of the time, true origin stones were merely a type of currency. With the support of a majestic empire, such currency could naturally be made virtual. After collecting their winnings, it was no surprise that Li Weiwei and Ji Yuna were both over the moon with excitement. They had gambled a mere 3,000 true origin stones each, yet after a multiplication of 10, and then a multiplication of 100, they both had a huge wealth of 3 million true origin stone now. Truth be told, 3,000 true origin stones was already a large amount of wealth. Both ladies had been reluctant when placing their bets. Now that their wealth had exploded to a whopping 3 million, they were naturally overcome with delight. Ling Han was also extremely overjoyed. However, such easy money could only be made once. After learning of his freakish talents, what gambling business would dare to place high odds on him in the future? He nodded in his mind. If he wanted to make money in the future, he would need to turn his focus back to alchemy. He had enough wealth now, so he could lavishly spend his money on alchemy. If this weren't the case, he would become dirt poor after refining a mere few cauldrons of pills. That's right, I heard that one other person bet on you to win. Li Weiwei laughed, and said, in addition to our bet, the gambling business almost broke even with what they received and paid out. They didn't earn a single cent. Ling Han was slightly surprised. There was actually someone else who optimistic about my chances. Who was it? An aloof yet beautiful face instantly appeared in his mind. Perhaps only Shui Yenyu was aware of some of his freakish capabilities. Moreover, it was likely that only she would support him. I obtained an invitation to the auction for you. Don't miss it, it's held at night 3 days from now. Li Weiwei handed him an invitation. Ling Han nodded as he took the invitation, and said, I'll definitely be there. Li Weiwei smiled in satisfaction, and then left with Ji Yuna. Now that their wealth had exploded, they naturally didn't care about the small morsels that they made from selling food ingredients anymore. Li Weiwei and Ji Yuna simply asked him for some ingredients to use by themselves. These ingredients were like spiritual meat, and one would become addicted after tasting them. Shui Yenyu arrived not long after the two females left. Wife, you finally remembered to visit your man. Ling Han said with a chuckle. Who's your wife? Shui Yenyu's face instantly flushed red with embarrassment as she fiercely rolled her eyes at him. TSK, so easily embarrassed. However, I like it. Ling Han walked over, and was only a mere few inches away from her. Shui Yenyu could only retreat. However, Ling Han would advance every time she retreated, and her back was quickly pressed against the wall. She had nowhere left to go. Her face became beet red, and she said, What do you want to do? You. Ling Han said with a nod. His entire body was pressed against Shui Yenyu's lithe and slender figure, and this caused her to tense up in nervousness. In the beginning, Shui Yenyu still didn't understand the meaning of his reply. After a short moment, however, she finally came to a realization. She rolled her eyes like crazy. Ling Han is normally so serious. Who would have thought that he's actually so cheeky in private? Have you decided to have kids with me yet? Ling Han said with a smile. I came here to discuss a serious matter with you, Shui Yenyu said sternly. I'm also talking about a serious matter with you. Ling Han's large hands were already swimming over Shui Yenyu's slender body. It's only been half a year, yet it seems to have grown a little larger already. Pervert. Shui Yenyu's breathtakingly beautiful face was glistening with allure. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, What serious matters did you come for? Release me, then talk. No, let's just talk like this. I'll talk about my serious matters, and you can talk about your serious matters. How could Ling Han release her now? He had already conquered her 2 assets, and he was currently estimating their measurements. Shui Yenyu's body became weak, and she couldn't even summon the strength to push Ling Han away. She could only roll her eyes fiercely. However, she was stunningly beautiful, so her rolling her eyes was no different from her making eyes. This excited Ling Han even more. I accepted a mission that can be completed by 2 people, so I came to find you, Shui Yenyu finally said. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh loudly as he said, "Is it because you miss me? So you're especially finding a reason to be with me? Who misses a pervert like you?" Of course Shui Yenyu wouldn't admit this. Ling Han tilted her chin and said, "Girl, if you didn't miss me, why did you deliver yourself to my doorstep? Hehe, since you've already delivered yourself over, it would be rude of me not to consume you." He lifted Shui Yenyu up and started walking toward his room. Shui Yenyu was scared out of her wits. What if Ling Han truly did her now? She immediately started to struggle. "If you don't want me to consume you now, that's also possible." Ling Han smiled naughtily and said, "However, you have to agree to a few conditions." Shui Yenyu could only begrudgingly agree to a few of Ling Han's humiliating conditions. This made her beautiful face flush an even deeper shade of red. "So, back to your serious matters, what mission did you accept?" Shui Yenyu rolled her eyes at him before saying, "A mission to exterminate some pirates." Her breathing was heavy as she spoke, for 2 large hands continued to roam around her breasts. This distracted her thoughts, and she rolled her eyes and said, "Can you stop for a moment?" "No." Ling Han shook his head solemnly and said, "Did you forget the conditions that you just agreed to? This damn pervert." Shui Yenyu mumbled in her mind. However, she had to admit that she actually really enjoyed this kind of sensation. Her reservedness as a female made her want to reject this yet accept it at the same time. Shui Yenyu forcefully composed herself and explained, "Students in the Shattering Void Tier Division don't have to complete any missions. However, starting from the Low Extreme Division, they have to complete a set amount of missions each year. Otherwise, they'll be expelled from the academy." Chapter 994, Great General Zhao's Reaction. Chapter 994, Great General Zhao's Reaction. Students at the Scarlet Heaven Academy had to complete a set number of missions each year. Of course, one could also complete a large number of missions in a single year, then complete no mission at all for the following several years. This was because cultivators would cultivate in seclusion for months on end after reaching the immortal level. In fact, some would even cultivate for a few years. The academy couldn't expel students for such a reason, right? The mission that Shui Yenyu accepted wasn't too difficult. Although it required them to exterminate pirates, it didn't require them to exterminate the entire pirate fleet. They only needed to kill a certain number of pirates. Moreover, this mission could be completed over and over again. As a result, the power of the pirates would be gradually weakened until they were eventually completely destroyed. However, these pirates were based quite far from the imperial capital, and even for cultivators at the Mountain River tier, it would take around 10 days to get there on foot. Theoretically speaking, Ling Han would be in grave danger if he left the imperial capital or even the academy, for that matter. After all, he had offended many people, and was more so a thorn in the sides of the 2 other majestic empires. It was truly a bad idea for him to travel so far away. However, Shui Yenyu knew that he possessed a spatial god tool, meaning he would be able to easily escape even if others tried to assassinate him. Ling Han couldn't refuse to eat for fear of choking and hide in the imperial capital forever, right? If he did, he would truly become a wasted talent. If he hid in the imperial capital, reaching the consummate level of the Mountain River tier would be his absolute limit. He wouldn't be able to reach the Sun Moon tier, much less the Heavenly Body tier. Ling Han fully agreed with Shui Yenyu's suggestion. He agreed to complete the mission with her after participating in the auction that was to be held 3 days from now. "Oh, that's right. You also bet on me to win, am I correct?" Ling Han asked. A smile blossomed across Shui Yenyu's face as she nodded. "How much did you bet?" 10,000 true origin stones. Ling Han smiled in surprise and said, "So it became 1 million. Haha, you won quite a large sum." Even the left minister would frown in thought if he had to spend 1 million, much less a 5th-rate force like the Shui clan. "It was all thanks to you," Shui Yenyu said as she smiled beautifully. Not only was Zhao Lun defeated, But he also had his face slapped in public with a shoe, no less. This was naturally huge news that quickly spread throughout the entire imperial capital. Everyone was discussing this matter and speculating how Great General Zhao would react. To the surprise of everyone, however, Great General Zhao released a statement and harshly scolded Zhao Lun. He strongly condemned his son's behavior, and nowhere in his statement did he even mention Ling Han. This astonished everyone in the imperial capital. Great General Zhao was known for being domineering, and Zhao Lun was more so his only child. He was actually willing to swallow such a great shame. However, a wary expression appeared on Ling Han's face when he learned of this. Great General Zhao's harsh scolding of Zhao Lun looked to be extremely righteous, yet he didn't mention Ling Han's name even once. This was clearly a kind of statement my son acted out of line, so I scolded him. However, was my son someone who could be humiliated by anyone? By refusing to mention Ling Han, was he insinuating that Ling Han was bound to become a dead person? Ling Han mulled over this in his mind. If Hu Feiyun hadn't interfered in the matter, would Great General Zhao still have issued this statement? I'll counter soldiers with arms, and water with an earth weir. He had initially wanted to stay low-key and only display his abilities when his cultivation level reached a suitable height. However, Hu told him to have a halo of trouble that always attracted problems hovering above his head. After 3 days, Ling Han headed to the auction. This auction was hosted by the imperial family, and thus no one dared to put fakes up for auction. Similarly, no one dared to raise bids maliciously, nor did anyone dare to refuse to pay for their purchases. The auction house was gigantic, and its interior design was very similar to that of a battle arena. The auction stage sat in the center, and the prospective buyers were seated along its 4 sides. The bottommost seats were for ordinary buyers, while level 2 and upwards were all VIP boxes. In total, there were 5 levels. Ling Han displayed his invitation slip and was led into a private box on the 4th level. Li Weiwei and Ji Yuna were already sitting inside. This private box belonged to the left minister. Only the Empress and the 9 kings had the right to enter the 5th level. Meanwhile, the 4th level belonged to the left and right ministers, as well as the 7 generals and so on. You're late, Li Weiwei said with a smirk. Drink 3 glasses as punishment. Ling Han sat down and took a small sip of the wine. It was extremely rich and aromatic. However, he naturally ignored Li Weiwei's call for him to down 3 glasses as punishment. Stupid blockhead. Putting on airs is all you do, Li Weiwei said unhappily. This auction was especially grand and high in grade as it was the first auction held after the opening of the Heavenly Sea Mystery Realm. It was clear that mountain river stones would be auctioned today, and perhaps even ones with special attributes would be sold among them. It was just that the latter would be much rarer than the former. Ling Han scanned the auction catalogue, and found that there were 12 ordinary mountain river stones to be auctioned. Meanwhile, there were only 2 special attribute mountain river stones, one of the metal element, and one of the water element. What piqued his interest was that there was a flight god tool to be auctioned as well. It was called Cloud Piercing Shuttle, and it could be activated using true origin stones. At its peak, its speed was 4 times that of a cultivator at the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier. He was going to embark on a journey far away soon, and if he obtained this flight god tool, he wouldn't need to worry about others trying to assassinate him anymore unless his enemies sent a cultivator at the heavenly body tier after him. However, how many cultivators at the heavenly body tier did the entire joint peace planet have? The circumstances surrounding the Heavenly Sea Mystery Realm were special. Otherwise, how could there have been so many heavenly body tier elites pursuing a small cultivator at the mountain river tier? He was determined to obtain this cloud-piercing shuttle. He continued to scan through the catalogue, only to discover that a few items were merely labeled as extremely valuable. Apart from that, there was no other description. Ling Han found this especially odd. Is it really okay to intrigue people like this? He raised his query with Li Weiwei. She had been to numerous auctions, so it was likely that she was relatively more experienced. Generally speaking, items without specific descriptions are all extremely valuable. Li Weiwei nodded, and continued, however, that isn't always the case. Some items might be incredibly rare, yet of no major use to anyone. Thus, it's not surprising for some of these items to attract no bidders. By the looks of it, he had to put some money aside. What if some of those items were useful to him? It was hard to determine others' identities as most people were seated in private boxes. However, the top 2 levels were reserved for a select few great elites, so it was still relatively easy to deduce who was seated in which private box. Zhao Lun has also come. Li Weiwei looked around, and humphed. This shameless person still has the face to meet others. Ling Han was also extremely surprised. He's just been slapped around in public, yet is willing to show his face again so soon? Ling Han's opinion of Zhao Lun became even higher. The fact that he didn't take others' views of him to heart proved that he truly possessed the domineering aura of a king-tier cultivator. A true king-tier cultivator wouldn't care what others thought about them, and their mindset wouldn't waver no matter the circumstances. Zhao Lun arrived, and Sho Yuan also arrived. The descendants of the 7 generals and the right minister all arrived as well. There's destined to be a bloody battle today. Li Weiwei chuckled, and said, however, no one can defeat me. She had a whopping 3 million true origin stones now. The auction started soon after. Ling Han was determined to obtain the cloud-piercing shuttle, so he had to use his money carefully. Although mountain river stones were desirable, Li Weiwei and Ji Yuna would both be fighting for them. He planned to leave these to them. Sorry for the long wait. Now, let the auction begin. An elder walked onto the stage with a cheery smile. The arena instantly fell silent. Chapter 995 Seed of the Reincarnation Tree. Chapter 995 Seed of the Reincarnation Tree. The auction progressed very quickly. Everyone had a rough idea of what each item was worth, and thus nothing exceeded its estimated value by too much. Few people fought over ordinary items as these could all be purchased outside. What was the point of wasting their money on them here? However, the appearance of truly valuable items would lead to heated competition. The appearance of the first mountain river stone instantly triggered a small crescendo. In the end, Li Weiwei had the winning bid of 7,000 true origin stones. She was about to reach the mountain river tier soon, so she could use mountain river stones to raise her cultivation level to the low extreme first. After that, she could slowly cultivate to bring her comprehension to the same level. Doing this would save a huge amount of time. The second and third mountain river stones gradually appeared for auction as well. Almost all of the winning bids came from Li Weiwei, Ji Yuna, and Shui Yenyu. Who told them to be so rich right now? After waiting for a long while, the cloud-piercing shuttle was finally brought onto the stage. After a brief introduction, the elder announced the starting price. The cloud-piercing shuttle starts at 100,000, and each bid must be at least 5,000 more than the former. This was very astonishing. The starting price was already a whopping 100,000, 110,000, 120,000. Bids came thick and fast in the beginning as flight god tools were not only extremely rare, but also incredibly useful. The bid on the cloud-piercing shuttle quickly exceeded 500,000. At this price point, the number of bidders had already decreased dramatically. After all, this was a huge sum of money, and most forces were hesitant to spend so much on a single item. When the bid reached 700,000, only 3 bidders were left. 730,000. Going once. 730,000, going twice. The elder was just about to end the bidding. 800,000, Ling Han said. 800,000, someone has raised the bid to 800,000. The elder was overjoyed. The more the item sold for, the more commission he would receive. 810,000. Someone on the third level raised the bid again. 900,000, Ling Han said casually. In this auction, the cloud-piercing shuttle was the only item that he was determined on obtaining. In fact, he even wouldn't hesitate to spend all of his true origin stones. His rival hesitated for a moment before saying, 910,000. 1 million. Ling Han raised the bid to an insane level. This time, no one raised the bid anymore. After all, genuinely large forces naturally owned flight god tools already, though no one would complain about having too many flight god tools. However, 1 million true origin stones was already the highest limit. This kind of flight god tool would appear every few years, so what was the point of overpaying right now? Hehe. Next up, we have a mysterious item for auction. The elder gestured with his hand, and a beautiful woman instantly walked on stage with a tray in her hand. There was a small pouch resting on the tray. This woman was extremely beautiful, and she was wearing a low-cut dress that revealed large swathes of her snow-white skin. Even part of her seductive and voluptuous assets was visible. However, no one gave her a second glance, as their attention was all drawn to the small pouch on the tray. That was the mysterious item for auction. What did the small pouch hold? Has anyone heard of the godly tree, the reincarnation tree, before? The elder swept his gaze around the arena. What reincarnation tree? I've never heard of it before. I've never heard of it, either. What kind of godly tree is it? Most people shook their heads. It wasn't that they were ignorant or ill-informed, but rather that this so-called godly tree was definitely too unknown. Don't tell me that it's that reincarnation tree, someone suddenly yelped. He was an elder who was seated on the bottom level. His hair was all white, and so was his beard too. Someone beside him hurriedly asked, Elder Zong, do you know this godly tree? This elder had lived for hundreds of thousands of years, yet he was still only at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. It was almost impossible for him to break through to the sun-moon tier. However, his old age coupled with his love for reading ancient books meant that he was quite renowned for his knowledge. According to legends, the reincarnation tree is a godly item that doesn't belong to this world. It can bring our divine sense on a journey, and a fraction of a second in the outside world is enough for one to experience 3 full reincarnations. This is an extremely mysterious item. Gasp. Then won't one be able to comprehend any cultivation technique if they use this godly tree to cultivate? Everyone exclaimed in astonishment upon hearing the elder's words. This was far too astounding. Any force would go crazy to obtain this kind of treasure. Which idiot had put this treasure up for auction? Ling Han's heart also thumped in excitement. He had taken a small sip of reincarnation tea before, and that had allowed him to experience 1 full life. As a result, he had been able to comprehend the profoundness of the shattering void tier much earlier than anticipated. Moreover, it had caused his divine sense to become far stronger than that of others at the same cultivation level as him. Was reincarnation tea made from the leaves of the reincarnation tree? Hehe, this small pouch holds a seed of the reincarnation tree, the elder said with a chuckle. Excitement spread throughout the arena, and many people instantly stood up in fervor. One had to realize that the accumulation of origin power required time. For example, one would gain 100,000 years of life expectancy with each minor level they advanced in the mountain river tier. However, it would only take a maximum of 10,000 years to accumulate one's origin power to the peak limit. What was hard was comprehending one's cultivation level and strengthening one's divine sense. However, if they could cultivate under the reincarnation tree, a fraction of a second would be equivalent to 1 lifetime. Would one still need to worry about being unable to comprehend their cultivation level? Would one still need to worry about being unable to strengthen their divine sense? It's mine, it's mine, it's mine. This was the only thought running through everyone's mind at this moment. Hehe. The elder chuckled, and said, I need to make something clear first. Although this seed has already been appraised and confirmed as the reincarnation tree, legends say that this tree doesn't belong to this world. No one knows how to grow it. Moreover, according to ancient records, the reincarnation tree needs 12 trillion years to grow. It's because of this extraordinary growth time that it can allow one's soul to experience a lifetime in just a fraction of a second. Pu. Everyone felt like spitting blood. Whether or not the tree could germinate was already a problem. Yet, even if it did germinate, it would still need another 12 trillion years to grow. Who could wait for that long? One had to realize that the lifespan of a cultivator at the consummate level of the heavenly body tier was only 40 million years. This was a long way off from 100 million years, let alone 12 trillion years. People often said that later generations enjoyed the shade cast by trees planted by the earlier generation. However, who would be able to enjoy the benefits provided by this tree? Perhaps one's clan or force would have already disappeared by the time the reincarnation tree became mature. This was 12 trillion years, not 2 billion years. Who could guarantee that their clan would prosper for such a long time? A large majority of people lost interest upon learning of this. The starting bid is 1 million true origin stones. Each increment has to be at least 10,000 true origin stones. The elder sighed as he announced the starting price. He knew that the price of the reincarnation tree would definitely fall dramatically after he revealed its lengthy growth time. However, the auction industry had its own set of rules and regulations, and if they lost credibility, how would they continue to do business in the future? 101 million. 102 million. There were still some bidders. After all, this was a genuine godly tree, and if they resold it to someone else, there was a possibility that they could make a huge profit. Purchase this tree, the small tower suddenly said. It needs 12 trillion years to grow. Do you think I can live so long? Ling Han asked in his mind. Chapter 996, Sho Yuan's Invitation. Chapter 996, Sho Yuan's Invitation. 12 trillion years. Even in the Black Tower, where 1 year was equivalent to 1,000 years, it would still need a terrifying 12 billion years. Ling Han didn't think he could live for that long. According to rumors, even great elites at the Genesis tier didn't have a limitless lifespan. Thus, the so-called immortals were only beings who were more powerful and had lived for longer. They weren't immortal in the true sense of the word. Small Tower swayed gently, and said, "This reincarnation tree seedling is worth more than all the treasures you have combined. You must obtain it." Ling Han shook his head as he spoke. "Why must I obtain it? It's not like I can use it." "Who said so?" Small Tower rebutted. "I have ways to speed up its growth." "Speed up the 12 trillion years?" Ling Han asked in surprise. "I can have it grow into a small tree after a maximum of 3 years, Small Tower said calmly. "It'll possess the ability to let your divine sense experience a faster time flow." "Fuck. You're definitely able to use secret techniques of time now," Ling Han speculated, and said, "Why don't you let me use it? Let me cultivate in seclusion for 3 days, but make it equivalent to 300,000 years of cultivation. When I come back out, I'll be able to belt all of my B***-starred enemies. It's because I've only recovered a small amount of my source power," Small Tower said. "In other words, I'm only able to use the regulations of time once. Using it on you is too wasteful." Ling Han sighed, and said, "Aren't you scared of hurting my fragile mind by speaking like this?" "That isn't within the realm of my consideration." Small Tower instantly became thunder again. Ling Han ended his conversation with Small Tower. Since Small Tower possessed such an ability, the reincarnation tree which appeared almost useless to others was a supreme treasure in his hands. 5 million. As he was lost in thought, the bid on the reincarnation tree had already exceeded its starting bid by 50%. However, very few bidders were left at this price point. It wasn't worth it. After all, no one could live until the day this seed grew into a towering tree. In fact, even their grandchildren, or grandchildren of grandchildren, wouldn't live until that day. The only option was to resell it in the hopes of making a profit. However, the high bid right now meant that there was already very little room for profit. 2 million. Ling Han raised the bid to an insane level. No one dared to compete with him. What if Ling Han didn't raise his bid anymore? Wouldn't the winner suffer a huge loss? As much as Zhao Lun hated Ling Han, he didn't dare raise the bid, either. He was afraid that he would be digging himself into a hole. The other bidders didn't have the Black Tower, so how could they dream of such a supreme treasure? How could they dream of 12 trillion years being compressed down to a mere 2 or 3 years? 2 million, going once. 2 million, going twice. 2 million, going 3 times. Sold. The elder was slightly disappointed as he announced the conclusion of the bid. It was the reincarnation tree, something that should have sold for hundreds of millions of true origin stones. It was a pity that its absurd growth time made it priceless only in theory. A content smile spread across Ling Han's face. He would have a reincarnation tree in 2-3 years, and as such, his spirit would have a limitless space to grow. Although he was the alchemy emperor, the large majority of pills could only improve one's origin power and body arts. One still needed to complete comprehension by themselves. However, with the reincarnation tree, he would have a limitless amount of time to undergo comprehension. Even a pig would be able to become a great elite of the Genesis tier. It's not that simple. Small Tower instantly shattered his dreams, and said, entering the spirit realm of the reincarnation tree will consume the reincarnation tree's mystical power. The more people enter, the larger the consumption becomes. Ling Han groaned, and said, couldn't you have told me earlier? I was afraid that you'd be stingy and not buy it. Fuck. How could Ling Han be so short-sighted? He shook his head slightly. This Small Tower was truly abusive and scheming. The auction continued, and Ling Han didn't fight for the remaining mountain river stones with Li Weiwei and Ji Yuna. Although he needed them as well, they were friends, after all, and Li Weiwei had even stood up for him before. He obviously had to return this favor. Ling Han also purchased a few pill recipes. These were valuable recipes that were only held by a few powerful forces right now. At the same time, he also purchased some medicinal ingredients. After his lavish spending, only less than 10,000 of his initial 4 million true origin stones remained. However, he didn't regret it at all. Money was only useful if spent. What was the point of keeping it? To count it every day for fun? When the auction finished, a worker from the auction house brought their purchases over. After paying, Ling Han headed to the private bank to retrieve the remaining true origin stones on the true origin stone card. There were only 10,000 left, and the private bank could definitely pay this out. Just as he was about to return to the academy, he saw a young lady walk over and stop before him. Young Master Ling, my young master would like to invite you over. This young lady was dressed in a black leather outfit, and the curves of her shapely body were especially clear. Her slender waist and curvaceous bottom provided a strong contrast to one another, and coupled with the reflective nature of her leather pants, she appeared wild yet seductive. Who's your young master? Ling Han asked. Sho Yuan, young master Sho, the young lady replied. She was none other than Liu Ying, one of Sho Yuan's female guards. Sho Yuan. Ling Han hadn't known who this person was before. Afterward, he had learned from Li Weiwei that it was the person who had stepped forward to prevent him and Zhao Lun from fighting. It was just that he had stepped back down after receiving some material benefits from Zhao Lun. He didn't have a good impression of this person. However, after pondering for a moment, he said, please lead the way. Please follow me, young Master Ling. Liu Ying turned around to lead the way. Ling Han walked behind her, yet he quickly realized that this was a mistake. The young lady before him was dressed in a figure-hugging outfit, and the curves of her firm and supple bottom swayed seductively with each step that she took. It was incredibly difficult for him to contain himself as her swaying hips invited him to transform into a wild beast. Ling Han hurriedly took a few steps forward to walk beside her. Liu Ying couldn't help but smile. She was naturally aware of what had happened, and a slight sense of pride welled up in her heart. After walking for a while, the two of them entered a pavilion. Although it was already late in the night, the pavilion's business was still relatively good, with a stream of customers continuing to enter and exit. The expression of everyone in the pavilion became serious when they saw Liu Ying, and they didn't dare steal a second glance at her. She was Sho Yuan's maid, and leering at her could potentially lead to trouble. Liu Ying led Ling Han to a private room on the 3rd level. She knocked on the door, and said, young Master Ling has arrived. Please enter. The voice of a man traveled out from the room. Liu Ying pushed the door open and let Ling Han enter first. Ling Han didn't hesitate as he strode into the room. Sho Yuan was currently drinking, with a young beauty cuddled in each of his arms. Their robes were half undone, revealing their jade-like skin, which dazzled with an alluring glow under the light of the room. There were another 3 sharply dressed beauties behind the man, and each of them wore a cold, stone-like expression. Ha 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 ha, please take a seat. Sho Yuan didn't stand up, and he pointed to a spot opposite him as he spoke. Is this how he treats guests? Ling Han was already displeased, yet he still accepted Shuo Yuan's invitation and sat down. He wanted to know what Shuo Yue had invited him over for. "I'll be frank and straightforward with you. I want the secret technique that you use to cultivate your physique." Shuo Yuan didn't beat around the bush, and he continued, "I can pay you however many true origin stones you want." Chapter 997, Wishful Thinking. Chapter 997, Wishful Thinking. Ling Han ignored Shuo Yuan's offer. He was indeed in desperate need of more true origin stones. Although he had just earned 4 million, he only had a measly 10,000 left after spending a vast majority of the money during the auction. Moreover, he had actually wanted to bid on a few more items, yet his lack of money prevented him from doing so. After all, he still had to leave some true origin stones for cultivation, right? At any rate, regardless of how desperate he was, he definitely wouldn't teach the indestructible Heaven's Scroll to others. Even if he wanted to, he had no way of teaching it. This was because the level of this cultivation technique was far too high. Shuo Yuan didn't lose his temper upon seeing Ling Han's lack of response. Instead, he clapped his hands and said, "Dongyu, Maya, you two go over to entertain my friend." "Understood," the two females replied sweetly. They slowly walked to Ling Han's sides and were just about to lean into his body. Ling Han frowned and made a pushing motion with his arms, causing the two females to slide backward. "What, are you not satisfied?" Shuo Yuan was slightly surprised, and he explained, "Dongyu and Maya are the most popular girls in Fragrant Pavilion. Not only are they beautiful like flowers, but their cultivation levels are also at the mountain river tier. With the chaotic star's majestic empire's huge population, the term beautiful was in fact quite ordinary. 1 in 10 females could be considered beautiful, while 1 in 100 females could be considered exceptionally beautiful. It could be said that beauties were not rare or special in this majestic empire. However, beauties at the immortal level were much rarer. It was a barrier, and even with the resources of the immortal realm, only very few people could advance into the immortal level. Thus, this pavilion was also quite capable, seeing as they were able to hire 2 beauties at the mountain river tier to accompany guests. Ling Han shook his head and said, "If Brother Shaw has nothing else to say, then please excuse me for taking my leave." "What's the hurry?" Shuo Yuan said quickly. However, a hint of displeasure flashed across his eyes as he spoke. "You're a mere ant from a small world, yet you actually dare refer to me as brother. Pay." He still wanted to obtain Ling Han's cultivation technique, though, so he forcefully kept his emotions under control. He smiled and said, "You still don't know, right? Dongyu and Maya's techniques are dreamlike." Ling Han was stunned. Is this really a fucking great general's son? Why does he seem like a pimp? He's even talking about their techniques. He's truly drunk. He immediately stood up. Even if he was desperate, he still wouldn't touch females from brothels. "You're not satisfied with them?" Shuo Yuan still thought that Ling Han was merely repulsed by the two females' identities. He chuckled and said, "Ling Han, as long as you're willing to give me the cultivation technique, I can even consider giving my 4 maids to you. To tell you the truth, all 4 of them are still virgins." Seeing so many beauties by Ling Han's side, Shuo Yuan believed that Ling Han was merely a lustful person. As such, he would definitely be captivated by beauties. As if they were puppets, Liu Ying and the 3 other females' expressions didn't change. Ling Han sighed in his mind. How sorrowful. However, he didn't have the time or patience to deal with others' matters, and he immediately replied, "A noble person doesn't seize that which is owned by others. Now, please excuse me, Ling Han." Shuo Yuan's expression became stern, and he said, "Don't test my patience. Don't think for a second that you can look down on everyone just because you have the support of the 9th king. Don't forget, you're merely an ant from a small world." "Thank you for your reminder," Ling Han said emotionlessly. His impression of Shuo Yuan had already fallen to rock bottom. Truth be told, although Zhao Lun would seek revenge for the smallest of grievances and was also extremely domineering, he still seemed to be much more impressive when compared to Shuo Yuan. The 9 sons of a dragon were all different one. Sure enough, even great General Shaw wasn't exempt from this. Apart from his relatively strong talent in cultivation, Sho Yuan was really no different from ordinary rich playboys. Sho Yuan raised his voice and said, "Ling Han, this is the final warning." Ling Han ignored him and calmly walked away. Peng. Sho Yuan heavily slammed the table, sending glasses flying and causing wine to flow down the tables. Young Master Sho. Dong Yu and Maya both leaned over and called at him seductively. If it was any other time, Sho Yuan would definitely have been all smiles as he embraced them in his arms and let his hands roam over their bodies. Now, however, he humphed angrily as he pushed both the females to the floor. "You really think that the Ninth King will be attracted to someone like you?" His voice became cold, and he said, "Liu Ying, keep a close eye on him. Immediately report back to me if he makes any moves." "Understood." Liu Ying half knelt as she accepted Sho Yuan's command. Ling Han shook his head as he walked out of the pavilion. Exchanges were supposed to be done on a basis of mutual agreement, much less one that entailed a secret technique. Wasn't it normal for him to reject such a request? This rich young master had probably never experienced such kind of rejection before, nor did he accept others' refusal of his requests. Ling Han immediately entered the Black Tower after returning to the academy. "Small tower, how do I plant this?" Ling Han retrieved the seed of the reincarnation tree. "I'll cultivate a piece of land first." Small Tower's voice was quite serious, which was completely different from normal. This made Ling Han realize that the seed of the reincarnation tree was tremendously valuable even in the eyes of Small Tower. Boom! Small Tower was the true ruler of the Black Tower, and under its manipulation, a piece of land that was brimming with spiritual energy was quickly cultivated. One had to realize that no matter what Ling Han had planted before, Small Tower had always been half-hearted and indifferent. Right now, however, it was actually personally cultivating a piece of land to plant the seed. This made it abundantly clear just how much Small Tower valued this seed. "Your luck is truly through the roof," Small Tower said. "The reincarnation tree is a supremely precious treasure." Strange. Why does this place have a reincarnation tree? Ling Han opened the pouch and found a seed that was the size of a broad bean resting inside. Its body was full of circles, and looking closely, one would realize that these circles were infinite in number. Ling Han only looked at it for an instant, yet he already felt as if he had expended all of his mental energy. A layer of sweat appeared on his forehead. No wonder this seed could be appraised as a reincarnation tree even on the Joint Peace Planet, where the overall cultivation level was relatively low. It was indeed very peculiar and impossible to fake. "Plant it," Small Tower said. Ling Han tossed the seed into the newly cultivated land, after which Small Tower cast some special force to act on the piece of land. The land instantly started to glow with mysterious multicolored light. "Done. All we have to do is wait patiently now." There was a hint of exhaustion in Small Tower's voice. Ling Han nodded and said, "Thanks for your hard work." He exited the Black Tower and started to examine his cloud-piercing shuttle. He obviously had to learn how to control this item before they set off. The cloud-piercing shuttle was only 3 or so meters long. It was sleek and silver-white, and it looked much like a silver shuttle one. Thus, its internal volume was naturally small, with only 2 people being able to fit on each row and only 2 rows in total. This was no problem for Ling Han, as he had the Black Tower, which was equivalent to having limitless space. After a short while, Ling Han finally understood how to control the cloud-piercing shuttle. He then informed the Academy that he was about to leave for a mission. This was a necessary process, especially since Ling Han had another identity, was the Emperor of the Great Ling Empire. He was a hostage right now, so he needed to receive approval before he could leave the imperial capital. Otherwise, it would be seen as a provocation to the chaotic star's majestic empire. 2 days later, he received approval from the Academy. Chapter 998 Action from all parties. Chapter 998 Action from all parties. When Ling Han filed his request with the Academy, numerous forces in the imperial capital all received notifications. What? His actually leaving the Academy at a time like this? Moreover, his even leaving the imperial capital? Is he seeking death? The Luo clan and Zhao clan will definitely seek revenge. He'll face certain death once he leaves the imperial capital. Indeed. No matter how prodigious he is, he's still only at the medium extreme of the mountain river tier. His battle prowess definitely can't exceed the consummate level, and far too many people are able to suppress him. Does he think he can do as he pleases just because the Ninth King supports him? Although he's a prodigy, he's far too stupid. Being a cultivation prodigy has nothing to do with whether one is socially adept or not. This kind of prodigy, there's no point investing in him. He can only cause trouble, and he doesn't know when to advance or retreat, either. All of a sudden, the various forces that wanted to recruit Ling Han all chose to retreat. They had already been cautious to begin with, as Ling Han had offended Zhao Lun, after all. If they really recruited him, they would face the risk of offending the Zhao clan. Now that Ling Han was acting so rashly, they could only shake their heads in disappointment. If they recruited Ling Han, it was entirely possible that he would bring great calamity upon them and destroy their entire clan before he even grew to become much. Luo clan residence. That brat actually left the imperial capital? Luo Hongdao faltered momentarily. He was almost unable to believe that someone could be so stupid. However, he immediately started laughing, and he said, "He's truly asking for death. Go, send someone to kill him. The assassins from the Dark Knight Hall are far too unreliable. It's already been so long, yet they still haven't managed to kill this small cultivator at the mountain river tier. Since he's traveling so far away, be sure to clean the scene up properly. It can't have anything to do with us. It's 100,000 true origin stones, after all. There's no point in giving it to others for nothing. Most importantly, remember to retrieve the crimson ground locking net. The clan sacrificed a lot to forge it, and we definitely can't have it fall into someone else's hand." Zhao Lun sat upright as he listened to Zhuo Xiao's and Fan Yong's reports. A cold smile tugged at his lips, and he said, "Father privately obtained some mountain river stones for me. He even gave me a 9 darkness divine pill. I'm going to cultivate in seclusion, and when I exit, I'll have reached the peak stage of the consummate level. When the time comes, I'll break through to the Sun Moon tier and become the youngest elite at the Sun Moon tier in the history of the Majestic Empire. So, I'll hand the task of killing that ant to you too. As you command, young master." Zhuo Xiao and Fan Yong both went down on one knee as they respectfully accepted Zhao Lun's command. Even though Zhao Lun had been greatly humiliated, they still didn't dare show even the tiniest ounce of disrespect, as they knew that he wasn't inferior to Ling Han. They were naturally more optimistic about Zhao Lun's prospects. He was the son of a great general, while Ling Han was merely an ant from a small world. Was there even any comparison at all? The Ninth King was still young, and she was still at an age where her temperament would fluctuate greatly. Her having a favorable impression of Ling Han now didn't mean that she would have a favorable impression of him in the future. In any case, Zhao Lun was still the only child of great General Zhao, right? Zhuo Xiao and Fan Yong were both stunned by Zhao Lun's words. Zhao Lun was bravely marching forward after suffering utter humiliation, and if he could truly break through to the Sun Moon tier, he would definitely become the most dazzling prodigy in the entire Chaotic Star's majestic empire. This step was far too hard to take. At least 90% of immortal-level cultivators in the Chaotic Star's majestic empire were at the Mountain River tier. However, only less than 1 in 10,000 would eventually succeed in breaking through to the Sun Moon tier. Zhao Lun was less than 1,000 years old right now. One's head would go numb at the thought of him advancing to the Sun Moon tier. Just how bright was his future going to be? Zhuo Xiao and Fan Yong both sighed in astonishment. Although their talents were slightly inferior to Zhao Lun's, they were still 2-star geniuses who were closing in on 3 stars. However, the gulf between them became far more evident when looking at how fast their cultivation levels rose. They were already over 20,000 years old right now, yet their cultivation level was still only at the high extreme. It was because they received far fewer cultivation resources than Zhao Lun that the difference between theirs and Zhao Lun's talent had been magnified so immensely. Although that ant is only at the medium extreme, he possesses a powerful spiritual secret technique. These 2 jade seals can defend against 100 or so spiritual attacks, take them with you. Zhao Lun tossed 2 jade seals toward his followers. Thank you, young master. Zhuo Xiao and Fan Yong were both overjoyed. When it came to god tools, those that were related to the divine sense were the rarest. Meanwhile, those that were used for offensive purposes were even rarer, most being used for defensive purposes. Even so, god tools that were used to defend against spiritual attacks were still immensely valuable, as they could only be refined by great elites at the heavenly body tier. Zhao Lun pondered for a moment, and he still felt that their chance of success wasn't high enough. He retrieved a sword, and said, I'll bestow you 2 with this purple moon crescent sword as well. My father has carved 9 divine patterns on it, and once activated, it can unleash a battle prowess on par with cultivators at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Zhuo Xiao and Fan Yong had still been a little anxious before. After all, Ling Han possessed the crimson ground locking net, meaning he could render one of them immobile, and thus allow himself to complete an insta-kill. However, this sword filled them with confidence again. So what if Ling Han possessed the crimson ground locking net? They would directly cut it into pieces. Understood. We'll definitely do young master proud, they answered confidently. Shui Yenyu came to find Ling Han, and they left the imperial capital together. After exiting the city gates, Ling Han stood in the distance and gazed at the ancient city. All kinds of emotions swirled in his mind. Although he hadn't stood out too much in the imperial capital, there had always been a nagging pressure that reminded him of his identity as a hostage. Now that he was finally able to leave, this feeling of pressure was instantly replaced with a feeling of relaxation. He had indeed left once before, but that time was different, as there had been a Ding Lian watching over them. He had been like a prisoner let out for fresh air. He had only been able to head to the Heavenly Sea Mystery Realm, and whether he traveled or stopped had not been up to him to decide. Wife, it's only the 2 of us now. Ling Han smiled, and said, perhaps you can give me a passionate kiss or something. Shui Yenyu rolled her eyes, and said, now that we've left the imperial capital, dangers lurk around every corner. Can't you be a little more serious? Fine, I'll be serious. Ling Han retrieved the cloud-piercing shuttle, and then said, wife, after you. Shui Yenyu didn't correct how Ling Han referred to her. His face was as thick as a city wall one, and she was happy with this title as well. Shio. Ling Han activated the cloud-piercing shuttle after they both entered the god tool. The sleek and beautiful shuttle instantly sliced through space at a tremendously quick speed. Only when it became a tiny black dot in the distance did the deafening roar of a sonic boom finally travel over. It was incredibly hard to break the sound barrier in the immortal realm, and only very few elites at the Sun-Moon tier could achieve this feat. The tailing forces all humphed heavily upon seeing the shuttle disappear into the distance. There's no need to hurry. Their destination is definitely the Star Sea. We can assassinate them when we get there. The shuttle was insanely quick as it sped through space. Shui Yenyu's eyes were looking straight ahead, yet her beautiful face was flushing redder and redder with each passing second. She finally couldn't contain herself, and scolded, I'll chop your hands off if they keep messing around. Ling Han chuckled, but didn't retract his hands. Instead, he hugged Shui Yenyu over, and said, wife, I love it when your mouth says no but your body says yes. Pervert. Shui Yenyu's face was flushed red with embarrassment. You really need to learn some new vocabulary. You call me the same thing over and over again, and I've almost become tired of listening to it. Shui Yenyu was just about to retort, yet her ruby lips had already been sealed by Ling Han's kiss. The words in her mouth instantly melted into a seductive moan. At the same time, her jade-like arms involuntarily wrapped around Ling Han's neck, her enchantingly beautiful eyes becoming misty like water. Chapter 999, Tyrant Axe Harbor. Chapter 999, Tyrant Axe Harbor. The cloud-piercing shuttle raced toward the west. Ling Han and Shui Yenyu were alone in the shuttle, and they also had especially strong feelings for each other. Thus, it was unavoidable that they were lovey-dovey and hands-on with each other. However, they both had strong self-restraint, and didn't cross that last barrier. Even with a flight god tool, it still took them 9 days to arrive at the Star Sea. The Star Sea was a vast inland sea, and it was rumored that it was formed by a star that had crashed down from the sky a long, long time ago. Some people speculated that it was a shard from a star that had been shattered. As a result, people would occasionally see structures that were full of foreign flavors resting on the seabed. However, none of these structures were in good condition. How could they be in good condition under the tremendous force of a crashing star? At any rate, it was a shard from a continent, so it scattered a large amount of godly metal throughout the star sea. Moreover, the level of the godly metal was relatively high, causing many people to come here and search for it. They would strike it rich if they could find a piece of high-level godly metal. If they could find a high-level god tool, then they would obtain an even more astonishing wealth. In fact, there were also lost cultivation techniques and spirit medicine among other things scattered throughout the star sea. It was rumored that someone had even found a powerful high-level puppet here before. To put it simply, this vast expanse of sea was a treasure trove. It was precisely because of this that pirates started to gather here. Their aim was to plunder those who came here to test their luck. Ling Han stopped the shuttle when they arrived at the seashore. This stretch of sea was especially uncanny, and it produced an extremely powerful gravitational force that would greatly limit the ability of flight god tools and cause them to sink toward the bottom. It was as though the continent remnant still possessed a tremendously powerful gravitational field. In fact, even normal ships were unable to sail here, as they would face the risk of drowning at any moment. If one wanted to sail across this sea, they had to construct their ship from the bones and skin of the demonic beasts that lived here. Only by doing so would their ship possess a buoyancy that could counter the gravitational pull. The reason for this was because the physiques of the demonic beasts had transformed to adapt to this sea after having lived here for countless years. The pirates that Ling Han and Shui Yenyu had to exterminate were naturally located in this sea. However, they had no idea which island the pirates were based at. This group of pirates was especially careful, and they had never revealed the location of their base to anyone. As a result, trying to annihilate them became extremely difficult. Fortunately, Ling Han and Shui Yenyu didn't need to track down the pirate base and annihilate it by themselves. Instead, their plan was very simple. They would join a fleet and wait for the pirates to attack. Then, they would seize the opportunity to kill some pirates. Anyhow, their mission was simply to exterminate a few pirates, so they would have completed their mission after they reached a specified target. "We can also try our fortune while we're at it," Shui Yenyu said. "People have found level 10 godly metal here before." Shui Yenyu had already introduced the Star Sea to Ling Han while they were traveling here. Ling Han immediately nodded, and said, "My luck has always been good." He wasn't kidding. He had come here by splitting open the skies, so he had received the luck of heaven and earth as a blessing. Thus, his luck was indeed better than others. Luck was not something to belittle. Back in the lower realm, Shenyuan Ziguang was someone who had possessed freakish luck. He could trip over spirit tools as he walked, and he could also obtain supreme inheritances when he jumped off cliffs. Ling Han's luck wasn't as freakish as Shenyuan Ziguang's, but he was definitely still someone who was enveloped in the glow of luck. Shui Yenyu nodded in agreement. She was relatively knowledgeable regarding small worlds, and she knew that those who split open the skies would receive rich blessings from heaven and earth. These blessings included raising one's power, tempering one's physique, and perfusing one with luck. "Then you can be the leader for this trip," she said. Ling Han smiled as he stowed the cloud-piercing shuttle away, and teased, "Don't you know that the husband's duty is to guide the wife? It's only natural that you listen to me." "Damn pervert." Shui Yenyu humphed softly. "Do you think it's a fresh term just because you added a dam in front of it?" Ling Han said with a smile. "Let's go." Shui Yenyu started to head off. Their target was Tyrant Axe Harbor, where ships would set sail at fixed intervals. Of course, one would have to pay a reasonable sum of money to board these ships. After all, the ships that could sail out to Star Sea were exclusively owned by the force behind this harbor. The harbor wasn't far, and the two of them arrived there in no time. It was a very important supply station as many people headed out to sea from this harbor. As a result, a small town was also developed next to this harbor. This town had inns, brothels, and casinos, and one could enjoy themselves as much as they did in the imperial capital and other large cities. However, a town was a town, after all, and this place measured no more than 5 kilometers in both length and width. 3 sides of the town were surrounded by a tall wall that was engraved with extremely powerful defensive divine patterns. Meanwhile, the 4th side faced the sea, and from here, one could see the 10 or so ships of varying size that were currently docking in the harbor. A flag that had an image of a bloody axe was hoisted high above the center of the town. This was the symbol of this place. Ling Han and Shui Yenyu were instantly stopped at the entrance of the town. Each person has to pay 1 true origin stone. 5 people stood before them with their arms crossed in front of their chests. They glanced over Ling Han and Shui Yenyu, and in the end, all of their eyes stopped on Shui Yenyu. They looked her up and down, and truly wished that their gazes were hands that could strip her naked. Ling Han stepped sideways and blocked Shui Yenyu behind him. I've never heard about having to pay a fee to enter Tyrant Axe Harbor. Well, now you've heard of it, a robust white-clothed man said. However, if the beauty behind you kisses each of us once, we can let you 2 through with only 1 true origin stone, another sturdy man said with a chuckle. His face was filled with lust and debauchery. He, if you blow me, I'm even willing to pay you 1 true origin stone instead. Ha 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 ha. The 5 people started to roar with laughter. Although there were powerful and domineering descendants like Zhao Lun, Shuo Yuan, and Luo Ba in the imperial capital, they lived under the feet of the empress, after all, so they were only rich playboys at most. Here, however, the powerful oppressed the weak, and the ugliness of human nature was magnified to its extreme. Power was the language of the cultivation world, and power was what earned respect. This girl is so deliciously beautiful. Who would have thought that such a beauty would appear in this kind of rural place? Girl, give me a smile. One of the men couldn't contain himself, and he raised his arm to push Ling Han aside as he teased Shui Yenyu. A dark shadow fell across Ling Han's face. Give me a smile was his line, okay? Wasn't his class being dragged down now that a rural ruffian was using his lines? He raised his hand and grabbed the sturdy man's wrist. What balls? You even dare to target my wife? Fuck. You dare to resist? The sturdy man faltered momentarily before violently trying to pull his hand away. However, he found that his wrist was trapped in a vice-like grip that he couldn't break free from no matter what. Anger instantly bubbled up inside him, and he viciously swung his other arm toward Ling Han. Humph. Ling Han shook his hand. Pa. There was a sound of bones shattering, and the sturdy man's arm instantly became as limp as a noodle. All of the bones in his arm had been pulverized. The sturdy man was dazed for a second before finally coming to his sense and letting out a wretched scream. Ah! What balls! You actually dared to hurt someone from the Black 5 gang? The other 4 sturdy men flared up in rage as they drew their weapons and surrounded Ling Han and Shui Yenyu. Chapter 1000 Entering the Town. Chapter 1000 Entering the Town. These 5 people were all in the mountain river tier, but they were all only in the low extreme. Some were in the early stage, some middle, and only one had reached the peak stage. Shui Yenyu stepped out, burning with fighting spirit. Because she had made a sum of money, she had also bought 3 mountain river stones at the auction, and along with some alchemical pills she had bought, her present cultivation level was close to reaching the peak stage of the low extreme. Hence, she was impatient to find out exactly how far had her abilities improved. These 4 could be said to have delivered themselves up to her door. She gave a soft shout, and charged out with her sword in hand. She moved as lightly as a fairy, yet was as graceful as a demon. At first, the 4 men looked perverted, but when Shui Yenyu's sword sliced over, an expression of terror suddenly appeared on their faces. How could they bother to indulge in their fantasies any longer? They quickly brandished their respective weapons in preparation to parry the oncoming attack. Even in the Scarlet Heaven Academy, there was a limited number of even 1-star geniuses. You should know just by looking at the enrollment assessment for the Northern Institution only 20-odd people had managed to get through to the 5th floor. However, The Scarlet Heaven Academy had already gathered all the young geniuses of the whole chaotic star's majestic empire. With that comparison, it was clear how rare even one-star geniuses were. Shui Yenyu was above a genius of 1 star, but did not reach up to 2 stars. However, this was not sealed. In the future, she could possibly cross over into 2 stars, and could also possibly degrade to 1 star. But, with the God tool in her hands, her current battle prowess was capable of surpassing 2 stars. The other 4, on the other hand, had only ordinary talent, and did not possess tier-surpassing battle prowess. Hence, even if it was 1 against 4, Shui Yenyu was still the one holding all initiative, her advantage extremely apparent. After all, she had a dominating battle prowess of 2 minor levels, so even if it was 1 against 4, fighting was very relaxed for her. Ding, 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 ding. She was very forceful, and her beautiful face had already frozen into ice. Compared to Ling Han, she was naturally even more enraged to have others take liberties with her. Aya, that sturdy man Ling Han had subdued, was dumbstruck. Only now did he realize that this couple was not to be trifled with. In his shock, he seemed to have even overlooked the pain in his arm. Only when Ling Han slapped him did he begin to scream. "Shut up!" Ling Han rebuked, and said, "I will ask, and you will answer. If I am even the slightest bit dissatisfied, I will first cripple your other arm, then break your legs. Understood?" "Yes, yes." The sturdy man's forehead was completely covered in cold sweat. However, Ling Han's voice was so cold, and he did not doubt in the slightest that Ling Han would definitely be firm enough to do as he had threatened, and he hurriedly forced down the massive pain he was experiencing. He was bemoaning their terrible luck in his head. If he had known that this couple would be so forceful and powerful, he should not have trifled with them even if he was beaten to death. "Tell me, how many different forces are there in this town, and which are the strongest?" Ling Han asked. Now that they had come to an unfamiliar place, the first thing to do was naturally to get to the bottom of the power balance in this place. The large man hurriedly collected his thoughts, and finally related what he knew. Even though Tyrant Axe Harbor was not big, there was also astonishing profit hidden here because there was a great many people who went out to sea, which attracted a considerable number of different forces. The largest was naturally the owner of the Tyrant Axe Harbor, the Yang clan. The patriarch of the Yang clan was named Tongtian, his cultivation level at the high extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. Even in the imperial capital, it would qualify the clan to be ranked among the 4th-tier forces, which was quite extraordinary. Bafu was the name of the first-generation patriarch of the Yang clan. 1 billion years ago, the Yang clan had already established themselves here. Their history was even much longer than the chaotic star's majestic empire, and until this generation of Yang Tongtian, they had already passed through close to 100 generations. Every generation's patriarch of the Yang clan would inherit the name of Bafu and a god tool, the Tyrant Axe. Its level was as high as level 8, and it could match an opponent in the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier. This was also the reason why the Yang clan could oversee this place, and not decline through these billions of years. All the ships here were under the control of the Yang clan, and if cultivators came back with their harvest back from the sea, the Yang clan would also buy it from them in the first instant. In most cases, they could buy these treasures at the lowest possible price. In these innumerable years, the power of the Yang clan had become incredibly strong, and it could not be moved. The Yang clan would get the bulk of the profits, but naturally would also leave some scraps for others. Hence, there were also 5 gangs here, and had respectively taken control of the various businesses such as the brothels, casinos, and inns in the town. Due to competing over customers, there was no lack of fights among these forces, and people dying was an extremely ordinary occurrence here. There were no duels to the death here. Even the slightest argument could result in an exchange of blows, and life and death would be decided in an instant. Precisely because of this, the inns here had very good business. Once you had checked in, you would receive the protection of the inn, and would not need to worry that someone would sneak up to your bed in the middle of the night to chop off your head. Of course, the inns here also came with exorbitant prices, and there was still a considerable number of people that simply found a corner on the streets to rest for the sake of saving money. However, it was also possible that they would not get back up again, and all their valuables would naturally be looted completely. The Black Five Gang was precisely one of the 5 gangs under the Yang clan. They had control over 5 inns, 3 casinos, and 2 brothels. The boss of this force was called Jiang Ji, an elite in the medium extreme of the Sun Moon tier. It was unknown whether he was in the early stage, middle stage, or late stage. You just had to know he was very awesome. However, recently the Black Five Gang and the Great Chariot Gang had been fighting heavily, with both sides incurring heavy losses. That was why the Black Five Gang had been so shameless to run to the town's gate to collect entrance fees. It was to supplement their household expenses. So he is in the Sun Moon tier. I can't match him now. Ling Han mumbled softly. Putting aside the fact that Ling Han was only in the medium extreme now, even if he had reached the consummate level, it was impossible that he would be able to match the Sun Moon tier. This barrier was like the gulf that separated the sky and the ground. No genius had ever been heard to have been able to surpass a major cultivation tier to defeat his superior opponent. From the look of things now, we can't possibly stay in an inn belonging to the Black Five Gang. He turned to look at Shui Yenyu, and said, "Wife, don't play anymore. Let's hurry and go in." In truth, Shui Yenyu could have defeated the 4 people long ago. However, she wanted to try out her various techniques, and thus treated the 4 of them like her newfound sparring partners. With Ling Han's urging, she lost all interest. Then, drawing her divine sword in a fancy pattern, she burst with full power. Peng, 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 peng. The 4 of them were suddenly sent flying by the attack, and there was fresh blood seeping from their chests. They had all been severely wounded, but not one of them had died. She was not a rash person. In this place, the glorious reputation of the Shui clan was of no use. Even the identity of the disciples of the Scarlet Heaven Academy would not bring them any additional protection. Hence, if they could avoid offending anyone too heavily, it was best to do so. With them making such a huge commotion with their fight at the gate, it was naturally impossible that no one would have seen it. However, those who passed merely acted like they had seen nothing. They seemed to be very used to this kind of battles. Chaos. This was the common feature of the majority of places. You should not think that the whole world was peaceful and prosperous just because the rules in the imperial capital were well enforced. Ling Han and Shui Yenyu entered the town. They first went to the harbor, and found out that the ships here would only leave once every 3 days. It just so happened that the last ship had left yesterday. Hence, if they wanted to go out to sea, they would have to wait 2 days. Thus, the duo first went to seek out accommodation. Naturally, they could not possibly stay at an inn belonging to the Black Five Gang. Ling Han deliberately sought out an inn belonging to the Great Chariot Gang. Since the 2 forces were engaged in such heated competition, he would not need to worry that the Great Chariot Gang would collaborate with the Black Five Gang to rob and kill them in the middle of the night even if he had offended them. When they entered the inn, Shui Yenyu's sexy and enchanting figure immediately drew a considerable number of looks, and there were some that did not even bother to conceal the desire hidden in their depths. Chapter 1001, Bad Mouth. Chapter 1001, Bad Mouth. Beautiful women were the most common resource on the Joint Peace Planet. As long as one reached the mountain river tier, it was really much too easy to take a beautiful woman as wife. However, beautiful women could still be divided into different categories. A difference in identity and status would lead to a different level of the attractiveness of a beautiful woman. A pretty daughter of a humble family and a royal princess were both women, but how could the feeling of conquering them be the same? Shui Yenyu, meanwhile, was not only breathtakingly beautiful, she also had a graceful air about her. Every move she made was incredibly graceful and seductive, and would cause others to become infatuated and fall head over heels in love with her. Added with her cultivation level of immortal level, she had naturally become the focus of attention of all those around them. Who would not be enchanted upon seeing such a seductive beauty? What a beautiful girl. Just look at that backside, both round and erect. I really want to go up and give it a touch. Hihi, her breasts are quite big too. I probably wouldn't be able to take hold of one with just one hand. There were very many people eating in the hall, and some were already spouting out obscene words. Ling Han's eyes froze over, and focused on one of them. "Brat, what are you looking at?" It was a middle-aged man that looked to be in about his 40s. He had a thick, solid build and a fierce face, yet he was actually wearing a long bright red robe, making him seem extremely out of place. He pointed at Ling Han, and threatened, "If you continue to look, I'll beat you to death." Ling Han. Shui Yenyu gripped onto him, not wanting him to fight in this place. Ling Han shook his head, and pulled her hand away. Then, he strolled over to the middle-aged man. "Brat, are you having a great flash of anger for that beauty?" the middle-aged man sneered. "You are probably a spoilt young master from some clan, right? That's why you obtained such a beauty. TSK, without that kind of background, how could you have qualified?" He was filled with jealousy, his eyes slightly bloodshot. Just think, he was in the high extreme of the mountain river tier, yet absolutely did not have Ling Han's good fortune with women. "You're already so old, yet all your years of experience might as well have been wasted on a dog. Since you speak with no thought at all, what use is there for you to have this mouth?" Ling Han strode over, his face very icy. Since he and Shui Yenyu were going to stay here for 2 days, then if he did not make his position clear, it was inevitable that these people would run their mouths and take advantage of Shui Yenyu with their words. "What a sharp mouth." The middle-aged man smirked coldly. "Young man, I will teach you well today. Without your background and your clan, you are nothing." The two were about to erupt into a fight at any moment, yet the others were merely laughing on the sidelines, watching the show. Since this matter did not concern them, it was natural that no one would speak out. Furthermore, the innkeeper did not call a halt, either. Their duty was only to prevent outsiders from coming to make trouble. Since these two themselves wanted to fight, then it was all right even if one of them died. Of course, if either the middle-aged man or Ling Han asked for help, they would still interfere to stop the battle. Ling Han had already come close. He was angered, his aura lightly surging, and possessing an intimidating might. This was because his divine sense had far surpassed any ordinary medium extreme cultivators, and had also been tempered multiple times by the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, so it was naturally like a divine weapon on its own. "You seek death." The middle-aged man suddenly struck out with a palm strike, directly aiming for the top of Ling Han's head. Though he said he wanted to teach Ling Han a lesson, his move was meant to be fatal. Whoever actually believed his words was really much too naive. Ling Han humphed, and similarly struck out with a palm, heading straight for the palm that the middle-aged man had shot at him. Pa! The two palms crashed into each other. Suddenly, a thunderous sound rang out, and a shock wave visible to the eye surged out from where the two fighters' palms collided. Instantly, a few tables in the surroundings were flipped over. The middle-aged man released a pained howl. He only felt as if he had delivered a palm strike straight at a piece of godly metal, which was an impact strong enough to crack the bones in his hand. The suffering was indescribable. He looked at Ling Han in shock. No matter what, he could not believe that this young man who was only in the medium extreme would actually possess such massive strength. He was in the early stage of the high extreme. He took a step back, and gripped his right hand into a fist, striking out once more at Ling Han. Ling Han similarly gripped his hand into a fist, and the two fists collided. Pang! Instantly, the middle-aged man's figure swayed. He retreated a total of 7 steps successively, and crashed into the table behind him. Due to the impact from the power he had used to protect his body, the table was directly turned into pieces and sawdust. He still had not stopped his retreat, but the person sitting at that side stretched out his hand in a shove, and finally stopped his movement. He hissed through his teeth, then raised his hand, and saw that part of his fist had actually caved in. Obviously, his bones had been broken. Otherwise, this kind of wound could not possibly have appeared. Curses, how could there possibly exist this kind of physique? The middle-aged man was both astonished and infuriated. In the first place, cultivators were most wary of battling at close quarters, and he was bullying Ling Han because the latter's cultivation level was below his. He had not thought it'd be he who was on the losing side in these two exchanges, which made him feel incredible regret. This brat had to have concentrated on cultivating his physique, and that was why his defenses were so terrifying. He was even more certain of Ling Han's identity now. The latter surely was the heir of some great clan, and that was why he had so many resources to temper his physique. It should be known that the cost of boosting the physique to immortal level was frighteningly high. Every day, he would have to bathe himself in precious divine medicine, and only after countless years had passed could he be successful. Otherwise, why would there be so few that had cultivated their physique to immortal level if everyone knew that it was very beneficial to have a tough physique? It was not that they did not want to, it was that they could not afford to. The middle-aged man was almost mad with jealousy. This young man's cultivation level was lower than his, yet he possessed the kind of physique he could only dream about, and also had a woman that he wanted to push down just from seeing her. It was all because of his background, and because he had a wealthy noble clan to support him. Die, he howled loudly. Wang, a sound wave surged out of his mouth, and actually formed a human figure that was brandishing a staff. The human figure waved the staff, and struck out at Ling Han's head. He had finally learnt his lesson, and drawn out the distance between himself and Ling Han to finally deliver this attack. A sound-type martial arts technique? Ling Han was slightly surprised. This kind of martial arts technique was very rare, and he had never thought that he would encounter it when he had just arrived in this place. However, no matter what kind of martial arts technique it was ultimately dependent on the abilities of the user. Thus, he was naturally unafraid. Xiao, he charged over, wanting to directly combat the root of the problem. The human figure that was formed from sound waves struck. Ling Han merely raised his hand, catching the staff. Peng, his figure slightly paused, but the force of this strike had also been dissipated. He looked at his arm, and saw that his sleeve had burst open. There was also a light mark left behind on his skin. The opponent was a high extreme cultivator, after all, so he should not be underestimated. He merely sighed ruefully, yet caused the spectators to be incomparably astonished. Hey, hey, hey! This brat is only in the medium extreme, yet he can actually face Hu Chiwei, who is in the early stage of the high extreme, directly and even cause a little loss to Hu Chiwei. His abilities are really quite shocking. He has to be a one-star genius at least. His physique is even more astonishing. He must be a member of an influential clan, and has thus used various divine medicines to temper his physique since childhood. Their thoughts were more or less the same as those of the middle-aged man, Hu Chiwei. They all were completely certain that Ling Han was a member of a powerful clan, which was why he possessed such a tough physique, and perhaps he was able to become a one-star genius even more because of this factor. Those that were trying to make a living here were basically all lone cultivators, who did not have a very good background. All of a sudden, they were filled with envy towards Ling Han. Chapter 1002 Beaten Until Bursting. Chapter 1002 Beaten Until Bursting. Die, die, die. As Hu Chiwei moved continuously, he continued to open his mouth to roar. Sound waves blasted out one after another, and they all formed into human figures, brandishing staffs in attack towards Ling Han. Peng, 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 peng. One staff strike followed after another. Though they could not damage Ling Han, it was still an attack of an elite in the high extreme in the end. Hence, Ling Han was stopped from advancing further, and he could not get near Hu Chiwei. Ha 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 ha, young man, your good background only allowed your foundations to surpass others, but fighting would still have to depend on experience. Hu Chiwei exclaimed, laughing loudly. I have battled all the way until today, and it has already been 210,000 years. How could you compare with me? Ling Han could not help but stare. To a person that had come from a small world, who was used to the limits of a normal lifespan, even a shattering void tier cultivator would only be able to live around 1,000 years or so. Even if he himself had already leaped into the medium extreme, he had still not placed himself on that same level. His maximum lifespan had already reached 200,000 years. From this aspect, his relative age was really frighteningly young. He smiled faintly, and asked, "Is that right? Just wait until I shatter that handsome face of yours, and we'll see if you can still smile like this." Hu Chiwei inhaled a mouthful, and then suddenly roared loudly. Wang, this time, the human figure made of sound waves that appeared was at least 3 times bigger than before, and was wielding a sharp sword. The sound wave human surged over, and brandished his sword in a stab aimed directly at Ling Han's face. Ling Han humphed, stretched out his right hand, and Wang, the divine patterns of gravity were activated with a soft press. This figure formed of sound waves instantly dropped, its movements completely distorted. Peng! This sword from the sound wave human directly sliced into the ground, instantly cutting a massive hole in the wooden floor. Dust filled the air, causing a great many people to wave their hands to stop the intrusion of dust into their space. However, there were still a few people that were seated motionlessly. When the dust floated in their direction, it was stopped by an endless barrier, and could not go any further. Those people looked ordinary, but if one took a closer look, they would realize that a frightening aura was hidden in their bodies. The moment it exploded, they could easily crush any mountain river tier cultivator to dust. They were all elites of the Sun-Moon tier. What? Hu Chiwei was shocked. That attack just now was one of his most powerful, yet was easily dispersed just with Ling Han raising his hand. This was unacceptable to him. Ling Han kept up the attack, and delivered a punch. Humph! Though Hu Chiwei was stunned, he would not stand there and wait to be killed. He hurriedly retreated, and opened his mouth to shoot out another sound attack. However, now that Ling Han had gotten serious, what threat could these sound waves pose to him? The divine patterns of gravity activated, and these sound waves were all compressed, or even shattered completely. It should be known that a mountain river stone with a special attribute was extremely valuable, and the difficulty of obtaining one was very high, so how could their power be something ordinary? Ling Han once again used the divine patterns of gravity to affect Hu Chiwei's movement technique, and instantly narrowed the distance between the two of them, his fist heavily crashing down. Hu Chiwei stretched out his arms to parry, but with the effect of gravity, his actions were still a little too slow. Ling Han's fist forcefully invaded his defenses, and fell heavily on his face. Immediately, the muscles on his face rolled out in multiple waves, and then split apart with a par. He was sent flying, and just when he was about to collide with a pillar, a person jumped up and stretched out a hand to catch him. Otherwise, if the pillar broke due to the impact from the collision, this building could possibly collapse. When everyone looked once more at Hu Chiwei, they couldn't help but be stunned. Half of his face had been reduced to nothing, and they could clearly see broken bones and torn flesh, which made for a very bloody scene. Enough. If the battle continues, it will really result in death. The one that had caught Hu Chiwei was an old man with a white beard. Previously, no one had paid him any attention, yet he had appeared so suddenly just like this. He was an elite of the Sun-Moon tier, and at this moment, his aura was fully on display. Behind him, there was a complete set of sun and moon, showing that he was at the peak stage of the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. Elder Qian. Greetings, Elder Qian. A considerable number paid their respects. This old man had the surname of Qian, and his given name was Yi. He was an elder of the Great Chariot Gang. Even though he looked peaceful and kind, he was well known for his violent and cruel ways. The number that died in his hands was uncountable. Ling Han did not use the opportunity to pursue the matter further. He was only trying to make his position clear to stop others from slandering and tossing obscenities at Shui Yenyu. He nodded slightly at Qian Yi, then walked to the counter, and said, "We would like accommodations." 1 room or 2, the innkeeper asked. 1. 2. The former reply was from Ling Han, but Shui Yenyu hurriedly corrected him. 1. Ling Han placed his arm around Shui Yenyu, causing her body to soften, and the rebuttal she was just about to say became a pair of dazed eyes, electrifying enough to melt anyone's heart. The accommodations here cost a true origin stone per day. While you are in our inn, we guarantee your safety. Of course, if you yourself want to fight with others, that is a different story. Please first pay for 10 days in advance. If you do not stay for the full duration, we will not be refunding the remaining amount. 10 days later, if you still want to continue staying here, then you will have to pay another 10 true origin stones, the innkeeper said. How black-hearted. The ships here left once every 3 days, and most people would only stay for 2 to 3 days. But in this place, they would have to pay the rent every 10 days, and there was no refund, either. Ling Han drew out 10 true origin stones and handed them over. This was only a paltry sum to him, and he really did not care much for it. "Master, I'll lead the way," one of the workers said from the sidelines. He led Ling Han and Shui Yenyu up the stairs. There was a total of 5 floors, and they went to the 4th. The room could definitely not be considered lavish or luxurious at all, but the purpose of staying in an inn was for the sake of safety. Those that stayed here obtained the protection of the Great Chariot Gang. Unless the Yang clan came to ask for them personally, this place was absolutely safe. "Do the two of you plan to rest first, or come downstairs for a meal?" the waiter asked. "Rest. All right. Then, I shall not disturb the both of you." The waiter retreated outside, and closed the doors behind him. Immediately, only the two of them were left inside the room. When Shui Yenyu saw Ling Han approach, she hurriedly went on her guard, and said, "Don't you mess around." Ling Han laughed, and said, *******, what thoughts are your head filled with?" He switched to using his divine sense to send a message, and said, "Didn't you know that I have a spatial god tool? I'll bring you in now to take a look." Shui Yenyu immediately looked moved. That was a spatial god tool, a divine object that only existed in legends. Even the Empress herself could not possibly possess one. "Don't resist my divine sense," Ling Han said. Wu. Shui Yenyu had just nodded, but who would have thought that Ling Han would suddenly kiss her, and her response instantly became woo sounds. She quickly stretched out her hands to push him away, yet her hands became gradually weaker as she lost herself in Ling Han's passionate kiss. She was kissed to complete distraction, so she naturally did not guard her spirit. With that, Ling Han easily took her into the Black Tower. She did not realize it at first. A long while after Ling Han lifted his mouth, she finally came back to her senses, and said in annoyance, "You damn pervert, you're again acting shameless." She had not even finished her words when she was dumbstruck with shock, stunned by the scene before her eyes. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.